Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. All right. Hello, everybody. We are live, episode 332.
Yes, that's my favorite number. Did you know
really?
that? Yeah.
I didn't. For what reason?
Yeah, it's not a good lie. I guess
Oh.
I was trying to think of any reason to like 332. I don't have one.
Well, you tried. I guess like that's a good way to like bond with people. Is, you know, if someone says like their name is this and you like, oh, that's my aunt's name. Or, oh, that's, you know, you try to be like, oh, that's I love that number. But you have to then have a thing. Yeah, you have to have a reason. I would use that as a sales tactic if I was.
How could you make up a reason? What would your made up reason for loving the number 332? You know, 332 is the time I was born.
Yeah, that's a good one. 332, that's actually when I was born. I love that. I guess you could do like the number 32. Are there any famous players with the number 32?
No. 32 is a really rare jersey number. I'm going to look this up now.
Okay, hockeywriters.com, greatest NHL player for each jersey number. Oh, this is a fun article. I'm going to go read this after. Okay, 32 is, according to the Hockey Writers, Dale Hunter.
Okay.
Oh, there's a current one, a goalie. Brian, come on. I'm giving this away to you. A goalie in the league. Number 32 in the Western Division. Anyone in the chat gonna try to guess this? Who's number 32?
Jonathan Quick.
You did it.
Jonathan Quick. It is Jonathan Quick.
Why did you think not Jonathan Quick?
I thought he was like 31.
Well, you're close.
Philip Gustafsson is 32.
Oh, and your hometown goalie.
Kevin Lankin. I guess it's a goalie number.
Yeah.
Hunter Miska, Jonathan Quick, Antti Ranta, Alex Stalock.
But the most famous is Dale Hunter, who's not a goalie. Let's go figure. Go figure. All right, so we're gonna have some fun today. Matt's here. Brian, your ops. Now you can't say any of your tips.
Oh, that's okay.
I wish my ops was here. I don't even know who my ops is at the moment.
Why are you calling it your ops?
That's a say. That's what the young people say.
No, they don't say my ops.
Yeah, you say, yeah, this is my ops. These guys
You're
are my ops.
confusing this with like Call of Duty Black Ops.
I swear to you, that you could say the Nashville Predators Twitter account are my ops. That's like a saying that millennials or Gen Z say for when
show me one place.
I mean, I will, and you're gonna feel bad about it. Should I take time right now and search for it, or should we save it for after the show?
Oppo is more.
No
likely.
One says Oppo.
My Oppo. When are we calling it my villain for a little while?
Okay, I just Googled ops slang. When used with meanings. Okay, no. Ops. I should have read this before I went. Urban Dictionary. Ops. Opposite or rivals from another gang or opposing group, commonly misinterpreted as ops being short for cops or snitches.
Yeah, so I've never seen it ever used
It's in rap songs. Look, Julio's telling you, Brian, you just only listen to songs from the 90s, so you don't know. I'm up to date on pop culture. Genius. I once listened to a podcast. It was Rob and Kivanita podcast where every episode they spin a wheel of ideas. And one of the ideas was like Gen Z boot camp. And they got this guy, Phil T, to come on to teach them a bunch of slang that the kids are using. And ops was one of the things on their list. So I learned.
Okay, there is a song called Ops.
All right.
There's also a song called Photo Ops.
Brian, how much fab do you have left in the couple?
Matt is up to something. Matt has already posted in the league chat how many pending bids he has for tomorrow. Now he's telling me like he has no fab, so I get first. I think Matt is just trying to bait me.
Lying.
I think he's just trying to bait me into spending fab.
Well, but wouldn't it be the opposite? All you need to do is spend $1 to get the thing. To get the player over Matt.
I could save my $1. I mean, I already knew that.
Well, yeah. So how do you
save
think
my dollar?
I guess he wants to get other people to spend their fab against each other. Like, yeah, if I was him,
but then he comes in and doubles down in the live chat. I know Matt well enough from watching him this season. He's up to something.
Why
not? Have to figure out what it is.
Well, I think it would make sense. Let's say on a night when the Jari injury came out and he knew everyone was going to be bidding on DeSmith. Wouldn't it be smart of him with no fab? He knows he's not getting DeSmith. Wouldn't it be smart to be like, hey guys, how much are y'all going to bid on DeSmith? He's looking really good, right? You better bid a lot and then try to bid. That would make sense.
Yeah. Or maybe he's trying to bait me into using all my moves too soon.
Hey, he's a good player.
Right? He's just like, hey, Brian, why don't you use all 4 moves on Monday so then I can just pick up the pieces?
I mean,
the rest of the week.
I feel like Matt
because he
knows
can't make moves with Fab. So the only way he gets the guys he wants is if nobody has any moves left.
You could beat people with your wallet, or you could beat people with your head, or with your muscles. Those are the three ways to beat people. Okay, let's start the show.
You can also beat them with the pen.
Oh, we have to start the recording, Brian. Let's do that.
My dear.
I mean, the pen, that's an antiquated saying at this point. I think that the
keyboard is
Gen Z would be like, that's a stupid saying.
Mightier than the sword. Yeah. It rhymes. I mean, I've never heard of a pen warrior. I've heard of keyboard warriors, though.
Yeah. All right, so let's start the recording. I'm ready when you are. Let me know.
See, Matt has gone quiet. I'm just pointing out.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready to start recording?
Yeah.
Okay. 3, 2, 1, record.
Recording.
Get this going. Brian, help me come up with a joke. I didn't think of it. Or by two guys who...
Would you rather? It's a would you rather episode. So ask me a would you rather question.
Who would rather be playing fantasy hockey than... what's a boring thing people do?
Well, why don't you ask, like, what do you prefer? Like running away with a win in a matchup, or...
Well, it's the way the format
a runaway
is,
loss on a Sunday, or I know, but like maybe I don't know.
Who would rather? So hosted by two guys who would rather have a loss on a Sunday.
Okay, all right.
I still need the answer. Okay, I'll just take a second to think for a second. You entertain the crowd for 1 more minute, and then I'll. Why
don't you use the word ops since you're so confident?
Who hosted by two guys, one of whom is still ops with the Nashville Predators Twitter account.
That sounds forced.
Yeah, I know. That's why I wasn't going to go that way.
Okay. Do you regret not having kept Karlsson?
No. What has Karlsson done?
You haven't been following.
I have. But is he pointless in his last couple games?
I don't think so. Oh yeah, he is.
Karlsson's nothing. He's the same as always.
Okay.
He did have that game with 2 goals. I know
he did have the press conference with the Apple.
Yeah, that's why he's hot. And then they asked him if that was his best game ever.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just start. I'll figure it out as we go.
You think you will?
Ready to go?
Would rather be playing fantasy hockey than fantasy baseball.
I like the first half. I think we can think of something funnier than that, though.
Who would rather be playing fantasy hockey than real hockey?
Time with our families.
Than spending time with their...
Okay, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm just going to start. Yeah! Yes! Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest-running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who are super stoked for the fantasy playoffs to be almost upon us. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, as always, the poobah of prognostication, the IPP MVP, the fantasy hockey robot himself, Brian Com.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 332. Before the show, we were actually talking about, like, how many, can we name 3 NHL players who wear jersey number 32? Would you believe it's a goalie number? You've got Philip Gustafsson, Antti Ranta, Jonathan Quick, Kevin Lankin, and 4 goalies this year wearing the number 32. And that's why, you can trust Keeping Karlsson to bring you the numbers that matter.
Including the number 32, which are the last 2 digits of 332. Brian, of those goalies you just mentioned, who would you rather have for the rest of the season in your fantasy league?
Okay, let me just remember who I mentioned. Kevin Lankinen, for sure, right? I mean, he's had his peaks and valleys lately. He hasn't been consistently lights out the way he was earlier in the year, but he still seems to be capable of a huge start. Even, remember, there was the talk after Chicago played Detroit a bunch of times, it was like, oh, well, he's only good against Detroit. And it seemed to be true for like 2 or 3 games. And then Lankinen has had some really impressive performances since then. So I think he can do well against any team in the league. And that's why I would rather Kevin Lankin. That's a funny question to ask me. Would you rather?
Well, the reason I ask is because that's the format for this week's episode. We're going to try something new here. I've prepped the show. I've got a lot of interesting players to talk about, and I've grouped them into pairs, and we're going to play Would You Rather with a bunch of pairs of players from around the NHL, where I'm just going to throw up two guys, and then Brian's going to analyze them both and say who he'd rather have on his fantasy team. We'll see if we agree or disagree. So we're going to get to that in just a second. But before that, let's of course mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com, the #1 fantasy hockey website out there. I love Dobber Hockey. I'm there every day reading the articles, the daily ramblings. Frozen Tools is my #1 tool that I use to prep the podcast every single day. Well, I don't prep the podcast every single day, but I'm prepping to succeed in my leagues. I'm using Frozen Tools. I'm using Dobber Hockey. So check it out. Okay, Brian. So like we said, we're going to have our Would You Rather episode. First, I guess a couple small updates that I couldn't fit into the Would You Rather format. I guess we do need to quickly discuss this whole crazy situation in Vancouver where there's some like conflicting reports, but generally it's like a whole bunch of players and staff are like affected, like tested positive for COVID, are going through different symptoms. Like obviously we're wishing all of our best to all the Vancouver Canucks organization. I hope that everyone is okay and taking care of themselves. And yeah, as far as fantasy goes at this point, I know it doesn't seem like they're going to be playing for a while. We don't know when. It's like, seems like at least a couple weeks.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be a while, and we're not going to make any guesses. We're just going to follow our trusted sources on Twitter. Sorry, I hit something while I said that. We're just going to follow our trusted sources on Twitter and just take it a step at a time. We're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves. And really, it just does seem pretty scary. Like this is what we worried about going into the season, that playing hockey would be this dangerous for the players. So hopefully everybody recovers. I guess you probably want to know what the fantasy angle here is. And my fantasy angle is I wouldn't wait on any of them, really. Like I have Brock Besser and Patrick Demko on my roster. Demko is IR plus eligible, which is handy, but my IR is full right now, and I'm not that hesitant to drop him if I need to make a move. And honestly, Brock Besser, if I just need to win a playoff round, I might need that playoff spot. I might need that roster spot more than I need Brock Besser 3 weeks down the road when I'm not even in the playoffs anymore because I've lost because I burned a roster spot, which has happened to me the last 2 weeks. Like Vancouver had this really, really rough schedule going into what's happened to the team with COVID now. And so anybody who's holding them is really, really hurting. So take stock of how much you can tolerate burning those active roster spots on Vancouver Canucks players. And then if you need to say goodbye and hope that no other team is in a comfortable enough position to go ahead and jump on them and be like, yeah, I can burn a roster spot.
Well, I mean, maybe they will, but what are you going to do about it, right? Like, if you need to win, like you said, if you're eliminated, then it's not going to help you to get Brock Besser back. Yeah. In the couple, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, next week is the last week of the regular season, and then we have 6 teams that make the playoffs, so the top 2 get a bye. So for the teams that come in either first or second, they've got like 3 weeks until their first playoff matchup. So if you've like clinched a bye in the couple, yeah, might as well hold on to your Brock Besser because maybe in 3 weeks from now he'll be back. And also consequently, if someone else drops a player like that, you can grab them. But yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. It sucks that this is happening in the middle of the season. It sucks like from a human angle. It sucks that it's happening to our game, but got to roll with the punches. And this is, you test a good fantasy player by what they're able to do with injuries, right? Like, it sucks that Brock Besser isn't going to be available to you, but like, imagine if he got injured. Sure, you would have been able to stash him, but say he was out for the season, right? You would drop him and pick up someone else, and it happens all the time. So you'll just we're going to try our best in this episode to go through some players that you maybe want to look at in your free agent pool to make a replacement. The other thing I wanted to bring up, which I couldn't really fit into a Would You Rather, is Kyle Palmieri got benched today for the New Jersey Devils. I'm assuming in anticipation of the Devils wanting to trade him, just wanting to make sure he doesn't get injured. So this is probably going to start happening to maybe other players as well. I'm looking at you, Taylor Hall. Like Buffalo clearly isn't going anywhere. I'd imagine they're going to be trading Hall. So why wouldn't they take a note from New Jersey's book and stop playing him to make sure he stays healthy for a trade? So just be careful. If you've got a player on your team that you're depending on, that's someone who might be traded at the trade deadline, you might not be getting too many more games out of them for the next week or two.
Yeah, so you and I both have Kyle Palmieri on our rosters. It feels very Taylor Hall, doesn't it? Remember when the Devils sat him weeks ahead of what seemed like the day would be that they moved him? So they're, I guess, taking the same tack with Kyle Palmieri. And as somebody who has him on his roster, I really, really hope this doesn't go on too long, but hopefully your platform lets you move them to your IR plus or somewhere where you can just stash them in the meantime. But again, if you're in a desperate situation, it might just be time to be like, okay, I'm done. I need to move on from this player, and especially someone like Kyle Palmieri too, has been very on and off this season on a team that struggles to create offense. And also, a lot of speculation. Well, where is he going to go? He's probably going to go to a playoff team where he's not going to be relied on the same way that New Jersey tried to rely on him this year. Not to say that worked very well for him, but let's say he goes to Boston and plays on the second line with David Krejci. Is he even going to be able to get on the top power play because of how well Nick Ritchie is doing there? And who has produced well from the second line with David Krejci in the last 2 or 3 years? Pretty much nobody. So that would be my concern for waiting on Kyle Palmieri, because you think he's going to go to a better team. A better team does not mean a better opportunity. In fact, it usually means a worse opportunity. Another example would be Blake Coleman moving from New Jersey to Tampa last year.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. I wouldn't be too excited about Palmieri if he got moved. I guess if Taylor Hall gets moved, like a lot of people are still holding on to Taylor Hall, and he actually got an assist yesterday for what it's worth. But they're holding on to him because they're hoping he'll get traded to a situation that'll be better for him, like say at Islanders where he's playing with Matt Barzal. But it's not a guarantee, right? A lot of times players get traded at the deadline. It takes them a while. Mark Stone got traded at the deadline a couple of years ago and did nothing for a while. I remember Paul Stastny. Like I can think of a few players off the top of my head. Ryan Miller back in the day. I remember when he got traded from Buffalo, who was terrible then, so something's never changed. He was traded from Buffalo to St. Louis, I believe, and everyone was like, okay, now it's finally all the people who held on to Ryan Miller. Now we're finally going to have our great goalie on a great team. And if I recall correctly, he stunk. So don't get too excited about these players that are going to get moved at the deadline. I think that, like we were saying about the other things, like I think if a player is burning a hole in your roster and causing you to lose, you might just want to let go.
Yeah, everyone gets super excited to hear about transaction news, right? Like rumors is a whole hockey industry in and of itself, but so rarely do we actually see those rumors turn into some really meaningful, significant, actionable fantasy advice. So if you can find that manager, and we say this in the offseason too, if you can find that manager just so pumped because a player has moved or is rumored to be moved at the draft or whatever, maybe go chat with them and see what they want to do. I think the exception I'll make here, Elon, the one player I will wait for that's going to be traded or is likely to be traded is Taylor Hall. I am very curious to see where he goes. And if I had him on my roster, you have him on your roster.
No, right. I was just saying that. Yeah. First of all, I wouldn't wait for him. Yeah. I'm concerned about Taylor Hall. And also I traded him for Jordan Eberly and I'm very happy about it.
Yeah. So that's actually, and we put that up in our Cupful Trades channel on our Discord server. Have you checked to see what the crew thinks of your deal?
I mean, I don't really care. Like, I know it was the right move for me because I needed to win. And like Jordan Eberly got me 2 goals and an assist the day after I acquired him. That helped me win this important week for me. Okay. And plus I got fab out of it. So I don't really care what they think. I know what I'm doing.
Do you care that 22 voters out of, well, do you care if you know that 85% of all respondents think you won the deal?
Hey, I mean, I think at the end of the day, sometimes a trade is, you could judge it and say who won, but sometimes also it depends what you need. Like it was like when I traded Tavares for Meyer and Karlsson, everyone voted that I lost the deal, but I needed roster flexibility that week. And so there's like nuances to these things. And by the way, John Tavares, we're going to talk about him a little bit, not doing so well lately. But anyways, okay, let's get to our Would You Rather game that we have planned for today's show. So I want to start with a couple of defensemen, some high-end defensemen. I guess like when we're discussing this, we'll assume like a couple points. Okay. So we care mostly about offense, but also a little bit about peripherals. Like in the couple, we've got 4.5 for a goal, 3 for an assist. And then we've got like 0.5 for a shot, 0.5 for a block, 0.25 for hits. Hopefully that gives you a general sense. Maybe if, Brian, we sort of have a different answer, depending on if it's points only versus couple scoring, we can mention that. But that's the general gist that I'm kind of going for here when I'm thinking about comparing these two players, because it's the best league in the world. It's the one I think about the most.
Yeah. And if anybody wants to know what the couple scoring is exactly, keepingkarlsson.com or kicupful.com/rules is where you can find that information.
Okay, so I want to start with a couple high-end defensemen. Starting in Vegas, Alex Petrangelo finally returned from his upper body injury on Wednesday versus LA. Hasn't gotten on the score sheet yet in 3 games. He's taken a lot of shots, 7 shots in his first game back, and then 3 shots and 3 shots versus Minnesota twice. He also has 9 blocks in the 3 games, so he's helping you in the periffs. But obviously, if you have Alex Petrangelo, it's because you're expecting some goals and assists. He's been getting good deployment. He's been seeing top power play time for the last couple of games. On Saturday's loss to Minnesota, it was a loaded top power play. Like for a while, Vegas had been splitting it with like good players on both, but on Saturday it was Patches, Stone, Karlsson, Marchessault, and Petrangelo. But still, now Petrangelo's down to 10 points in 21 games on the season. That's a 39-point pace which would be his worst ever season if he continues it. So hasn't been that amazing for Petrangelo managers. Then I'm going to put him against Jakob Shikrin, who is, as opposed to Petrangelo, on pace for his best season ever, 22 points in 37 games for a 49-point pace. But that was looking a lot better like a month ago. He's gone cold lately. Going into today, he's pointless in 4 and has only 3 points in his last 11 games. And I say going into today because Arizona does get the Ducks around the time that we're going to finish recording the show. So who knows, maybe Shikrin will break out of his slump tonight by the time you've listened to this. So yeah, Brian, 2D with huge upside, but that are cold right now. Who do you like?
Okay, well, I'll start with Alex Petrangelo because you mentioned him first. And just going over his point pace, as you said, his point pace right now is 39 points for the season. And you go back to the last, I'm going to go the 4 years before this one, 50 points, then 60 points, then 50 points, then 60 points. So this was supposed to be a 50-point season for Alex Petrangelo, and he's falling 10 points short of that pace. And all that's been lost for Petrangelo this season has been lost on the power play. He's got the same power play time on ice as usual. And as you mentioned, good line mates still, mostly been playing with William Karlsson, Petry, Markstrom. But after scoring on about 11% of Petrangelo's power play shots over the last 4 seasons, and that's about the time that he's emerged as a top power play quarterback, Petrangelo has scored no times this season on only 11 shots, which doesn't say a whole lot. That's just a goal or two. And his shot rates are pretty steady, actually. So the real reason behind Petrangelo's power play struggles are systemic. Like the whole Vegas power play has really struggled to score, believe it or not. You wouldn't think so after naming the personnel that he gets to play with, including himself and Alex Petrangelo, but they have just a 7% shooting percentage while on the power play with Petrangelo on the ice, which would rank 28th in the league at 5-on-5. That means 27 other teams' 5-on-5 shooting percentages are higher than Vegas' shooting percentage when they have 1 or 2 extra men on the ice, which is not something that usually sustains. That's just like, that's bad shooting luck. They're facing some really hot goalies or just not getting the most fortunate bounces. So I'm actually not at all worried about Alex Petrangelo. His minutes are fine. His deployment is fine. His power play time on ice is fine. Pucks just haven't gone in. And under the hood, this Vegas power play is as dangerous as the St. Louis power play that Petrangelo used to quarterback. So if you've made it with Petrangelo on your roster this long, this is good news for you. There's hope. He steps it up a notch for you down the stretch and gives you more than he's already been giving you, which is like hopefully acquiring a fresh, upgraded Alex Petrangelo for your stretch run. On the other side, you asked me about Jakob Shikrin, who, has given up some of his power play role. Ekman-Larsson seeing a 50-50 split of power play time lately, and why not? This is like the hidden headline when we're talking about Jakob Shikrin. Out of nowhere, Oliver Ekman-Larsson is back. He's got 5 power play points in his last 7 games, including 2 power play goals, which was his bread and butter for a little while. Meanwhile, Jakob Shikrin has gone 15 games without a power play point, has just 2 power play points in his last 25 games, and getting 6 power play points in 37 games on the season for Shikrin, that's not going to get the job done for a power play 1 quarterback. If anybody anywhere was doing that, we'd say, get him out of here. That's like a 12 to 15 point full season pace, and I'm not having that for a defenseman quarterbacking the top unit. So where I see Shikrin is trying to score. Like Arizona still has their power play. It looks pretty centered around him bombing away from the point, but just hasn't been successful. And without that power play success, Shikrin is on a 50-point pace, which, by the way, is still good, but it sounds about right to me if he's not going to be collecting any power play points. So I would say, especially with Ekman-Larsson coming in and taking a 50-50 share of the Arizona power play, and Arizona moving to this like power play A and B setup. So we've got Ekman-Larsson, looks like he's playing with Brassard, Dvorak, Garland, and Schmaltz, and then Shikrin with Keller and Kessel. I guess that is still the first unit, but I don't know. They're not having any more success than the second unit. So there's nothing telling me Shikrin deserves a ton better than what he's getting. So if you're asking me to pick Petrangelo or Shikrin the rest of the year, I would rather Petrangelo.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with you. And I love Jacob Chikrin, and I'm a little bummed that he's gone cold. I'm hoping he'll heat up again right before our playoff run. It's clearly still possible. Like, he's not, getting terribly worse deployment. And with Alex Petrangelo, by the way, we should mention that he could get bumped from that top power play for Shea Theodore at any time. So it's not as if he has the safest upside also. But I think at the end of the day, you also just kind of go with the player on the team that you expect to score more goals. So that would be my tiebreaker. But yeah, well, it'll be interesting to follow and see which of these guys breaks out first. I think it's just a matter of time for both of them. But I agree with you that Petrangelo, I would bet on him getting hot first. Okay, so next up, a couple of centers. One of them we've already mentioned. So this matchup is like two players who at the start of the year wouldn't have even been a question, right? John Tavares versus Ryan Strome. And you think, of course, Tavares, don't even bother me with this garbage. But if you take a look, it's like not looking that awesome for Tavares so far. Like going into today, so Toronto also plays tonight, recording this Sunday night, and Toronto is going to play Calgary in a little bit. But going into today, Tavares has been ice cold lately. He has only 1 point in his last 5 games. He's actually on pace for his worst season since his rookie campaign, only 28 points in 37 games. It's a 62-point pace. I feel like Toronto's been scoring so many goals. I feel like if you don't have Tavares on your team, you may not even have noticed that he's not doing as well. But like clearly that Matthews, Marner, and the now Hyman line is the straw that stirs the drink, like for the offense in Toronto right now. Tavares and Nylander Galchenyuk has been pretty meh. Maybe I should just blame Alex Galchenyuk for this recent Tavares cold streak. But yeah, so Tavares, yeah, he's cold. Only 62-point pace on the year. If it was a different player, you'd be like, okay, so he's fine. Nothing special. Obviously, we know the upside that he has from previous seasons. Meanwhile, Ryan Strome, who had this whole narrative last year that like, oh, maybe he's like not that good. Yeah, he's getting a lot of points, but he's probably overperforming. Like he had a high shooting percentage. Like he's just benefiting from playing with Panarin. I don't know, say what you will, but now going into this season, he like finally went without a point for the first time in 12 games in Saturday's shocking 3-2 loss to Buffalo. Before that, he was on a run of 16 points in 11 games, and he now sits at 34 points in 37 games on the season. That's a 75-point pace. Strome is blowing Tavares out of the water, though of course the past doesn't always predict the future. So I'm curious to know if you had the option of one of these centers, who would you take?
I am going to take, I guess there's two choices here, right? Obviously, I'm not going to give my answer that quickly. There's upside, which I think does lean Tavares, and then there's certainty, which, yeah, I'm going to say Ryan Strome provides some degree of certainty. Right now, it is 75-point pace. Last year, he was on a 69-point pace. Everything looks good for him. So I don't think that's going to change, that Strome is going to produce between the 70 and 75-point pace the rest of the season. The question is, can Tavares top it? And this season, at 5-on-5, I don't know that he's got a lot of opportunity to do that. Tavares has this really pedestrian production at 5-on-5, and there's a few reasons for it. The first is not in his control. Actually, none of them are really in his control, but one of them is not due to variance. This is due to his coach. He's playing 60 seconds a night less at 5-on-5 compared to what Tavares was playing last year. Then there's a couple pieces of variance that are hurting him in particular. First, John Tavares' on-ice shooting percentage at 5-on-5 is barely above 6%, which is like 3, honestly, maybe even 4% lower than where I'd expect Tavares and his line mates to be shooting. And then his own shooting percentage is down under 6% compared to essentially double, compared to 12% in his career, which is essentially double what he's been doing this season. And I did some math that's worth about 4 goals there, which would be enough to get Tavares up to a 70-point pace if we regress that shooting percentage. But there's also this power play angle too for Tavares. He's down 37 seconds a night compared to last year, and he's got his lowest share of power play time during his time in Toronto so far. He had 70% share last season, 60% share the year before. This year, less than a 55% share of power play time for Tavares, as the Leafs are experimenting a little more with other line mates on that top unit with Marner and Matthews, like we've seen Thornton and we've seen Simmons. We've even seen Spezza get some time there, and that has taken some minutes away from John Tavares. So I think, like I said, he's probably at a 70-point pace just if you allow him his normal shooting percentage the rest of the way. But the other missing 5 or 10 points that keep him from being an 80-point player the rest of the season are in minutes at 5-on-5 and being that, or I should say not being that lock on the top power play anymore, even though he's still mostly there He's not as there as he has been the past couple of years. So your question is, do you take a 70-point Tavares who could really explode, especially if he does get some more power play one deployment, which honestly I'm open to. That power play one is doing just fine in Toronto, but the other guys on it aren't doing anything so special. Or you can just go with steady Strome at 70 to 75 points. I think I would go, like, this is tough for me. This is two flavors. I would want to go Tavares just for the upside, because I think he has a better chance of being able to hit an 80-point pace. But I definitely wouldn't begrudge anyone for choosing Ryan Strome, who's already there or already just below that 80-point pace, and I think is probably going to be able to stay there.
Yeah, this is gonna be one where I'm gonna disagree with you. I had a feeling you'd go Tavares. Like, I just have a couple things that you said. Not like I disagree, but it's like this vibe of, even if Tavares is on the top power play, like I said, it just really feels like this is the Marner and Matthews show this year. Like, I just don't feel like they're running things through Tavares. Meanwhile, Strome, like you're saying, like, oh, he's a steady like 70, 75 point guy. Like I said, he's on a huge run right now. The real story, of course, is Artemi Panarin, who's had 3 straight multi-point games now, and Strome is playing with him all the time. I don't know. I just feel like Strome is the safer bet to be like right there in the midst of all the offense, while it seems like the Leafs are happy to let Marners and Matthew get all the points. But it'll probably be close, but I think I would actually lean Strome.
I could totally be convinced to go for Strome. The question is, do you want a 75-point player whose probable ceiling is 75 points? Or do you want a 70-point player who has a ceiling of 80 points?
But like I said, like Strome has 16 points in his last 12 games. So when you say he has a ceiling of 75 points, lately he's been doing much better than that.
Right, but on the whole season, I'm not just going to look at those last that last group of games. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I think we're in agreement. I think I know what you're saying. Like, obviously,
this is really close. I could rather either of them.
Though it is kind of a bummer for people who drafted Tavares really high, because like clearly you weren't hoping we'd be having a debate about this late into the season.
I mean, Ryan Strome is pretty good.
Yeah, clearly, like anyone who drafted him is super happy that we're having this conversation right now. All right, let's stick on the Leafs. Let's go in nets now. I want to do another matchup where the answer would have seemed obvious, like even a month ago, but now I'm like really not so sure. So of course, we need to talk about the Leafs phenom goaltender Jack Campbell, who's coming off a great week where he beat Edmonton on Monday, then Winnipeg twice on Wednesday and Friday. He now sits at a record of 8-0. He hasn't lost yet. He's got a .951 save percentage. Who was this? Igor Shesterkin from last year? So it's looking like right now, Campbell coming in late and crushing it. Meanwhile, Frederik Andersen still hasn't skated, so who knows when he'll be back. And even if he does come back, why would the Leafs switch back to Andersen with the way Campbell's playing? Of course, Campbell isn't without his own health issues. He's been having his workload managed tonight. On Sunday, it's going to be Hutchinson playing, though it's a back-to-back, so Campbell's going to play tomorrow. So that would make sense even if he wasn't having his workload managed. So it's a small risk. Though actually, there was that one game that he missed and a couple weeks ago, and he ended up getting O status on Yahoo. So I was able to stash him for his scratch, which is nice. I wish all of my goalies, whenever they didn't play, I could like stash them in my IR. So it's not even the worst thing that he's having his workload managed. So that's Jack Campbell. He's looking awesome. On the other side, we have a sure starter coming off an amazing season who started strong this year, but has really been struggling as of late. I wonder if you could guess what I'm going to talk about. Another Canadian team goaltender, Jacob Markstrom. This guy stinks lately. He's lost 5 starts in a row going into today. Like I said, actually, Toronto's playing Calgary, so we'll see how Markstrom does today. But yeah, he's gone 3 straight games with a save percentage under 900, so just killing people over the last couple of weeks, down to a .901 save percentage on the season in 27 games, which is his lowest since he arrived to Vancouver back in like 2014. So Markstrom just overall now, even with that great start, like he's blown it all away, and now is having this like barely, like not even above average season. I'd say like below average season of any goalie in the league. To make matters even worse, Calgary plays Toronto tomorrow on Monday. And like, I guess so he'll play, right? Because Riddick is playing today. Oh, right. I think I didn't mention that. So yeah, today we're not going to be seeing Markstrom because Riddick is playing tonight. But yeah, so he'll get that game tomorrow against Toronto. And then Calgary's next 2 games next week are scheduled to be against Vancouver on Thursday and Saturday. And of course, those games aren't happening. So if nothing gets moved around, Markstrom is going to be giving you just 1 game next week. And he's not going to be getting O status, right? Because like, why would he? So at this point, are you really going to hold on to a Jacob Markstrom who's not even going to help you next week if it's a week where you need to win? I know, scary. And even if he was playing the way he's playing lately, I feel like you might want Jack Campbell. So that then becomes the interesting question. So obviously I want to do it in this Campbell versus Markstrom, but then in general, I'd be curious to know your general thoughts on like, is Markstrom a drop? Like, you know, like I personally in the couple, I've got Saros and Campbell. I don't want to drop either of them. Then I have Jonathan Bernier, your favorite, Brian, in my IR. He's going to be coming out soon. And I don't know, hold 4 goalies. And right now it's crazy to say, but I'm looking at Markstrom as a potential drop.
It is pretty crazy, especially for how hot Jacob Markstrom started his year. And we were talking about like how great is this guy? You were loving having him on your roster. 925 in his first 12 games. Since then, in 15 games, an 878 goalie. This is not a recent thing for Jacob Markstrom to be bad. Like when you said it, I was kind of taken aback where you're like, yeah, just a below average season on the whole. And I was like, oh, come on. He hasn't been bad for that long, but really, he has been for over half the season now. Even with that great start, Jacob Markstrom has fallen to having a Delta Fenwick save percentage that's below the expected number that an average goalie would be able to put up in the league. And this is also not something that changes. Like Daryl Sutter coming in is the other factor to Calgary for Jacob Markstrom and what that might do for him. And it hasn't moved the needle at all. Jacob Markstrom's 5-on-5 expected Fenwick save percentage before Daryl Sutter, 941. With Daryl Sutter, 941. Markstrom has actually just been worse with Sutter than he has before. And so have all the Flames. But the defense pairs have stayed the same. And I guess there's 2 layers here. There's what happened 15 games ago and what has happened in the last 8 or 9 games since Daryl Sutter came in. And I don't really have the answers to either of those questions, unfortunately. Calgary just seems like they're in a rough spot. And I think probably, like, you can look at Calgary's struggles on the whole and Jacob Markstrom and ask chicken or egg between the two. I honestly don't know, but I would be worried about holding him the rest of the season. For anybody insisting on holding him, which I don't blame you, because we've seen the high highs and we've seen a lot more good hockey from Jacob Markstrom over the last couple seasons than bad. That would be the reason to hold on and say, look, his talent didn't disappear completely unless he's playing with some kind of nagging injury. I'd expect him to be capable of getting back up to the levels we saw him at earlier this season. But however, goalies. So that's a tricky one for anybody rostering him still. Jack Campbell is the one I think I would prefer, even though his load management situation in Toronto is really frustrating. He's a difficult guy to roster in formats that reward volume like wins and saves because Campbell is so far only playing every other night, and that's without Freddie Anderson healthy. I understand why Toronto wants to be careful. You don't want to go into the playoffs and another year of your cup window where you're going in with your third stringer, who right now is Michael Hutchinson. I get it. But it's just really frustrating. I would love to see more of Jack Campbell because he's been really, really good. And I love to see in a small sample so far this year and a similarly small sample last year, he really seems like he could be for real. And in rates leagues, Campbell is a clear choice between Jack Campbell and Jacob Markstrom. The only reason I would rather Markstrom is if volume is really, really important to you. Although I guess we'll see how Riddick does tonight. And if he steals a start or two, the door has never even been open to him. But maybe that's one change with Daryl Sutter that's like, oh, okay, let's try our number 2 guy. Maybe something's not working. Maybe Markstrom needs a rest. But that would be the only situation that I'd prefer Markstrom over Campbell, is if he continues to be that workhorse number 1 and your league really puts that emphasis on saves. Otherwise, Jack Campbell.
Yeah. And if you don't need to win next week, because like I said, you're only going to be getting 1 Markstrom start. So he's a very tough hold right now. I'm going to agree with you on Campbell. Brian, off the air. How about I'll go now to, I'm going to skip ahead to Martin Jones, just because we're on goalies anyways. And then afterwards, that'll also lead nicely into our ad. So that's that. All right.
What's going on in the chat here?
I don't know. Looks like Adam is being ridiculous, according to K Townie City. Adam,
check
what
the
does he
link
want to do?
I posted later. Oh, like you posted a link already. You weren't predicting.
Soon we'll have Hall to Hall going to. Is that the ridiculous thing that Hall's going to get traded to Toronto?
Who's Earl Schwartz? What's going on?
All right.
Someone summarize this for me at some point. TLDR it.
We could read it. Like on YouTube, you could actually go back after the fact and watch the show, and like you could see the chat as it was happening. So we can go through and watch it after the fact. All right. Let's go. Okay, so All right, let's stick with goalies now, Brian. I want to go to San Jose and talk about Martin Jones because their win over LA on Saturday was their 4th in a row. And all of a sudden, the San Jose Sharks, like this is not an old episode. This is in 2021. The San Jose Sharks are tied with St. Louis for 5th in the West Division, just 1 point back of Arizona for the last playoff spot. Like all of a sudden, the San Jose Sharks, they're right in this thing. And a lot of that recent success has come on the back of none other than Martin Jones, who's led in only 2 goals on 67 shots in the last 2-game series versus the Kings. And he's now on a 6-1-1 run in his last 8 games, sporting a .940 save percentage in that span. Right. Martin Jones is like the goalie we've probably talked about the most on the show as being not good. I remember even back when he seemed to be doing well, you always had that hot take that if you look under the hood, like it was mostly supported by a high like power play or shorthanded save percentage, and like you predicted that he'd be bad even when he was doing well, and you were always right. But now all of a sudden, I guess we'll put you to the test again and see if you still feel that way. I wonder if maybe this time will be different just because you've maybe turned into a little bit more of a softie, because earlier on this year, the other goalie that you always used to completely disregard was Jonathan Bernier. Then you had the like miraculous turn, right? And all of a sudden you're like, no, Jonathan Bernier is great. What are you talking about? Like drop everyone to get Jonathan Bernier. Are you like equally convinced that Martin Jones, now from what we've seen over the past few weeks, is enough to say, yeah, grab Jones and ride him for your playoffs? And I guess since this is this or that, this is the only one where I don't actually have a single goalie to compare him to. I thought just for fun, I'm just gonna throw out a bunch of goalie names, all the goalies that are available to us in our Fantasy Hockey Trades invitational free agent list, where we added Martin Jones yesterday over all of these guys. I'm curious if you see Jones, you don't even have to pick one, but just like, is Jones like clearly above these guys, or is he just like the same, and like we should just stream? So I'm talking about Aidan Hill, who's the starter right now in Arizona. He's 4-3-1 in his last 8 games. He had a couple strong games recently versus Anaheim and San Jose, sandwiched by a beating by sandwiching a terrible beating by Colorado, where he was pulled after letting in 4 goals in 6 minutes. So hopefully people who had Hill were smart and benched him for that game. We've got Linus Ullmark, 2 wins in a row versus Philly and the Rangers. He's 7-5-2 on the season now. So, the Sabres had that terrible losing streak, but that was with Ullmark injured. So maybe like they're not as bad a team when they have Ullmark in net. So it's not like a guaranteed loss. Carter Hart, the short shifts guys talked about him before. He finally got in a game yesterday and was solid. He stopped 22 of 24, the 3-2 shootout loss to the Islanders. Mackenzie Blackwood, he's fine. Like 4-4-1 in his last 10 going into today. Got beat up by the Capitals today on Sunday. I'll throw Kevin Lankin in. So you get the kind of gist of the types of goalies. I'm curious to know, is Martin Jones like above these guys, or is he just like one of them? You're not buying into the hot streak.
Okay. Yeah. First, I just want to talk about Martin Jones and how wild this last run has been for him. Martin Jones, just off the charts, put up a .922 save percentage in March, has followed that up with a .970 performance over his last 2 games, stopping 65 of 67 shots. The last time that Martin Jones played a string of 5 or more games with a save percentage above .905, Elon, do you want to guess?
I mean, it's like, I remember the Sharks were good. Like he was good for a couple of years. There's a reason why he got that contract, right? So is it like back then, like 4 seasons ago?
It was March 2018.
Okay.
It's been 3 years since Martin Jones put together 5 or more games, or sorry, I should say more than 5 games that were above a .907 save percentage. So that's huge. And that's also the caveat here with Martin Jones is we're seeing something that we haven't seen for 3 years. And I'm using monthly splits to get this data, which obviously aren't perfect because like dividing by month, performance by month is pretty arbitrary. But you look through his monthly splits over the last, I want to spit at them. They're so bad. 885, 857, 882, 902, 890. It's this for 3 years, pretty much between this last run in March 2018 and this run he's currently on in March and April of 2021. So when you're asking me if I believe in him this time, the answer is no. Do I want to believe in him, Elon? Yes, desperately. There's so much fantasy value that we just lose in that Sharks crease every year, even though they're not as good a team as they once were. There are a couple years where there should have been value there, and there wasn't. So that's why I'm hoping, but that doesn't mean I'm hopeful that Martin Jones can keep him up. That said, I've added him to my Cupful roster in case that he can keep it up. So I've at least put some skin in the game here. Would I prefer him over all the guys you said? I'm going to take them one at a time. Yes, I'd prefer him to Aidan Hill Linus Ullmark is a real close one. I think I'd say no to Ullmark. I have a little more faith in Ullmark's rates, but of course, depending on how important wins are to you, in that case, I'd prefer Martin Jones versus Carter Hart. I'd call that a push versus Mackenzie Blackwood. Yes. I think I'd take him to Blackwood just because Blackwood is someone who we know isn't comfortable with that workhorse workload that is getting thrust upon him. And if the Devils are sitting Palmieri, they're in sell mode. So I don't know if we can expect a whole lot of good out of Blackwood the rest of the way. And then the last name you mentioned, then I'll let you chime in, Kevin Lankinen, who we talked about at the top of the show. I would prefer Lankinen to Martin Jones. But Martin Jones is like probably in my top 3 of this group of guys who you might find in free agency. As a goalie that you can add out of free agency, who's doing so well over his last 12 games and is on a team that seems to have something to play for the first time in maybe 2 months. Yeah, I'm into Martin Jones, just a little.
Yeah, I mean, all you really had to say is that you called him a push with Carter Hart, and that like answers the question to me. It means you don't have that much faith in Martin Jones. You have him in this tier. Basically, you're saying, yeah, he's another goalie that you could stream in and hope he continues to do well, but you're not expecting him to keep this up, which is fair. Like he's given us lots of reason. But yeah, I was wondering if he was like above these guys now, because of all these guys we just mentioned, Jones and the Sharks, they have a lot to play for, like, and they seem to be a really good team right now. So I was wondering if maybe you'd be like, no, the Sharks are good now. Seems like you need to see a little bit more first. You know that one person who really does believe in the Sharks and thinking that they're going to do well is Victor Nuno from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast. He messaged me and was telling me that I should even go bet on the Sharks to make the playoffs. And this was like a couple of games ago. So now all of a sudden the odds have probably gone down. But he was suggesting to me that maybe like Jones's work with goalie coach Nabokov is maybe perhaps starting to pay off. You know, trying to read into like trying to figure out like how is it that Jones is good all of a sudden? I mean, it is possible that players are like learn things, you know, and get better. Like you would think it's possible. So that could be the case. It's just like you said, it's so weird. Who knows? I'll be interested to see how the rest of the season goes for sure. But Brian, I brought that all up because if I did want to go bet on the Sharks to make the playoffs or to win the cup or anything like that, I would want to go to like a reliable website where I can place bets and be confident that everything's going to go smoothly. Do you know any such site?
I do. It's called mybookie.ag, and there's a ton of NHL and also NBA and MLB action there for you, regardless of your favorite sport or player team. You can choose from thousands of lines and prop bets on all major sports, and it's all in one place at MyBookie. Elon, you were checking out the San Jose Sharks Cup odds because of how pumped you were about this Martin Jones run. That Martin Jones is going to take them all the way to a Stanley Cup this season on this Sharks team. Elon, what kind of odds would you be getting over at MyBookie if you wanted to make that bet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, by the way, encouraging anyone to spend a lot of money on the Sharks winning the cup. It might be fun to throw down like 10, 20 bucks because the odds right now are plus 6,600. I've learned a few things. I messed this up actually last week. Plus 60. If you have a plus, that means it's like if you bet $100, how much you would win. So plus 6,600, basically that means 66 to 1 odds. So if I were to bet 10 bucks, I'd get like 660 bucks. So that's pretty good, right? That's a big return for not a big payoff. And yeah, the Sharks, I mean, winning the cup might be a little bit hard, but I don't know, they're looking good.
Winning the cup might be a little bit hard.
It might be a little hard. There's some good teams out there, like the Colorado Avalanche. And by the way, I should mention another reason to be into Martin Jones, not to like interrupt talking about my bookie, but the Sharks actually have a pretty sweet schedule over the next little while. Like they're not playing Colorado for a bit. They're playing the likes of Anaheim and LA and Minnesota, which is a lot easier. Anyways, yeah. So if you want to go bet on the Sharks, 66 to 1 odds right now over on MyBookie.
Yeah, so take a look there. And remember, like Elon said, you want to bet for fun, not for income, right? So just keep that in mind as you go over to mybookie.ag on the website or on your phone. And also use the promo code KeepingKarlsson, and they're going to match your first deposit halfway up to $1,000. That's free bonus cash credited to your account instantly on top of your deposit. Again, that's mybookie.ag with the promo code KeepingKarlsson. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. And we mentioned already about betting responsibly. You can head on over to responsiblegambling.org for more tips on how to do just that.
Okay, thank you so much to our friends at MyBookie. We're going to be back in just a second for the rest of Would You Rather on Keeping Karlsson. Okay, we are back. Brian, let's get into all the other pairings I have for you and the listeners to decide who we would rather have on our fantasy teams the rest of the way. We were talking about how dominant Colorado has been lately. So let's talk about a couple of players on that team in Joonas Donskoi and Nazem Kadri. This is another one where at the start of the year, this would have seemed obvious. Obviously, I want Kadri over Donskoi, but Donskoi, as has been discussed in like the stream scheme and on short shifts, like this isn't the first Keeping Karlsson property to discuss Joonas Donskoi because he had himself a week, right? His second half of March is the best, 10 game stretch of his career. He scored a goal versus LA, then went on a run of 15 points in 10 games, including a huge 3-goal and 1 assist game versus Arizona on Wednesday. Since then, he's actually gone pointless on Friday and Saturday, but still has been holding down that really sweet top power play spot over the aforementioned Nazem Kadri. Donskoi plays on the third line at even strength with Jost and Nichushkin. Meanwhile, Kadri has a couple assists in his last 3 games, which is fine. Before that, he was on a 4-game pointless drought, so he hasn't been doing much for you lately, especially compared to someone getting you hat tricks. He's been centering the second line with Burakovsky and Saad, but without the top power play, that becomes a lot less exciting. And also, the ice time between that second line and third line, there's not much difference. I don't even know. I'm just saying second line because Kadri is there, but you could easily say that the Donskoi line and the Kadri line are equivalent at even strength, if I may. So of course it's always possible that Kadri gets that top power play job back any game now. Do you have any guesses?
Yeah, I'm just gonna bust in. I don't think you can say that the second and third line are equal. Like you're talking Kadri versus Tyson Jost. I'll take Kadri. Then you're talking Brandon Saad versus Nichushkin. Maybe that's a push. And then you're talking, I see what you're saying. Then Burakovsky versus Donskoi, which right now you would take Joonas Donskoi. But I think I know who the 3 better players usually are.
Right. So I actually wasn't talking about the players. I was just looking at the ice time. I was just saying that it's not as if they're being deployed as a second and third line necessarily. Okay. But anyway, I'm just making the argument, the case for both sides. The case for Kadri is that he's been like Tavares, right? He's been better for longer. Joonas Donskoi is someone who wasn't drafted in any leagues. Plus, it's possible that Kadri gets back on the top power play. Maybe this is just a short-term thing. Kadri has held that spot for most of the year. So curious to get your thoughts on what's going to happen with the Colorado power play and who you would take. If you have Kadri right now and Donskoi is still out there in free agency somehow, is that a swap you would consider making?
It's not. I don't think this one, you won't be surprised to hear me say this. I don't think it's that close between Kadri and Donskoi, but I love that you're bringing it up because there's reason to think it is. And it's not just that Joonas Donskoi is hot now. He was hot at the start of the year too. This is not his first run of the year. 10 points in Donskoi's first 12 games, followed by 3 points in his next 12, then 15 points in his next 10, and now no points in his last 2. We've been on this ride before with Donskoi too, both with San Jose and with Colorado, but this is all shaping up to be Donskoi's best year yet with the most hot streaks. We usually see him run hot and cold a bunch of times all year. I guess if I wanted to really legitimize your take, and I do, it's a good take. What I've really liked from Donskoi in this last run that he's been on, that we've rarely ever seen from him in any kind of sustained way, is he's shooting the puck. In Donskoi's last 8 games, he's had 4 or more shots 5 times all season. In his previous 29 games, he had done that 0 times, having 4 or more shots on goal. He had 3 shots once, and the rest were 0s, 1s, and 2s in the shots column, and mostly 0s and 1s. So Joonas Donskoi, all of a sudden, shooting the puck, really, I think, more than he has in any other stretch of his career. Now, it's okay, well, he's shooting the puck. Does that justify all the goals that Donskoi is scoring? And my answer is no. In that 10-game run that just ended, Donskoi had 9 goals on 31 shots, which is great, 3 shots per game, but he scored on 30% of them. So that's not likely to hold. Also on the whole season, Donskoi is shooting 27% and has a career high 80% points participation at 5-on-5. So I know it's super tempting. And we see guys like Brandon Saad and Val Nichushkin go on runs in Colorado too. I'd lump Donskoi in with those guys as darts you can throw and hope that they pan out while they're on your roster, but they're not certain. Also, you mentioned the power play thing for Donskoi. He's been on the top unit for 3 games, has 1 power play point in those 3 games. So I guess that's good, but I don't know that he's going to hold there over Kadri much longer. I don't see why he would, unless this is a punishment to Kadri or reward to Donskoi. And I think everything's going to even out before long. I know Kadri's cold, but he's got 24 points in 27 games this season. He's had hot and cold runs like we saw from Kadri last year. And now he's cold 3 points in his last 10, but still 3 shots a game. And he's not that far removed from his time on the top power play. It's not like it was weeks ago and he's never getting another sniff. On the whole, Kadri's actually got career highs or approaching his career highs in 5-on-5 shot rates and has career high expected goals rates. His power play production also looks fine. Look, Kadri is locked in at a 55 or 60 point player for 3 of the last 4 seasons. And that 4th season that he wasn't, the outlier was just like, that was only because Kadri's shooting percentage was cut in half that year. Otherwise, 55, 60 point guy, so consistent. Donskoy, the opposite of consistent. And that's why for me, this is an easy Kadri decision.
Okay, that's fair. I do have a question though. You said 24 points in 27 games. That's not exactly right. Do you mean like in his last 27 games? He's got 27 points in 37 on the season.
Yeah. So maybe that, oh, okay. Let me look that up then. Yes, that must be what I mean. 25 and 31. Oh, I think I just took like his most productive. Okay, so
I don't think you're allowed to do that.
25 points and 30. I don't know what I did. Oh, yeah, that's what I did. That he just had a run where he had 24 points in 27 games. Or no, 22 points in 21 games. I don't know what slice I took there.
Donskoy has a good slice right now also.
Are you like, is this live?
No, this is off.
Oh, okay.
I want you to correct yourself.
Okay. You saying, okay, I'm looking through his game log and I'm not sure which games I selected to get that exact. Oh, I think it was, I think that was one slice of Kadri's season that just showed like longer sustained production than anything Donskoy had put together so far.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe just because I framed against Donskoy, and so you had to go hard for Kadri. I guess I'm thinking in a shallower league, if you could substitute Donskoy for just hot streamer, like just someone who's doing well right now that you might want to jump on, I would be concerned personally as a Kadri manager, just because if he's not on the top power play, how's he any different than your Burakovskis and your Brandon Sods, really? And he's also cold. But of course, he's got some shots lately. So I appreciate your answer. And yeah, Kadri's definitely a steady hand, someone I'm a little bit concerned of. But I would also bet, if I had to bet right now for the rest of the season, I would definitely take Kadri over Donskoy. But I don't know if I would take Kadri over the streaming spot where I can keep getting the next Donskoy.
Yeah,
You're
that's
muted.
great.
Oh, sorry.
No, you can probably just continue. I just want, so McCann, he only started seeing more than a 50% share 3 games ago.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know if you can figure it out.
I don't think it matters. Like, he's been on the top power play for
Well, it does matter because then I want to know who.
Okay.
Like who's pushing him.
So do you have a way to find that out?
No, I was asking you.
I don't know. I don't have a way. I only not quickly. I'm just gonna whatever. Like, you could say that Zucker. You're probably gonna say that you think Zucker's gonna.
No, I'm not. You don't know me.
I know who you love.
I just want to know whose spot he took because that's important information for who's pushing him.
My recollection was that Malkin. Oh yeah, maybe Kapanen. Yeah, because Kapanen got injured.
Yeah,
that's probably it.
It's Kapanen.
Everyone on Pittsburgh gets injured.
It was Kapanen. That's the answer.
Good job. Okay.
Thanks.
And I guess another possible example of random hot free agent, and I'm not referring to looks, though who knows? I think Jared McCann's a good-looking guy. Yeah, I'm talking about Jared McCann. Let's talk about him compared to like a worse version of Nazem Kadri, a player who's been scratched for his last 2 games, and Jacob Verana. So this is more of a question of hot streamer, or do you hold on to a person because you thought he'd have higher upside, even though you're totally snoozing right now because he's literally not even playing games? But yeah, let's start with McCann. Like, he has been making the most of his recent top power play deployment in Pittsburgh. He scored a power play goal and took 5 shots in the 7-5 loss to Boston on Saturday. He's also recently got an upgrade on the second. He's been centering the second line for a while now since Malkin got hurt, but now he's got Jason Zucker back. Brian, I know you like that. Evan Rodriguez on the other wing, and McCann now has 7 points in his last 6 games. So he's on quite a little run. He's only 17% rostered on Yahoo, while Jacob Verana is 55% rostered, which might be a bit high for a player who was healthy scratched on Friday, though, like, to be on and today. So I'm surprised by this. I didn't expect Verana. I thought he was going to have a breakout this year. hasn't exactly been happening. Before the scratch, Vrana, he'd actually started to pick things up offensively. He had assists in 2 of his previous 3 games. Before that was pointless in 4, and he was seeing really bad ice time before these scratches, down to 10 to 13 minutes per game. So I guess it was something we could have maybe foreseen. Overall on the season, Vrana sits at 23 points in 35 games for a 54-point pace, a step back from his 62-point pace in 2019-20. So I'm curious to know, Brian, similar to like the Canucks situation we discussed, like is Vrana someone you have to hold on to because of the upside, or are you at a point now where it's like clearly just drop Vrana, move on, and grab Jared McCann, for example, if he's available because he's hot and in a good spot?
I think at this point, you do drop Vrana and move on. And that's hard for me to say. I like Vrana, and I really liked what I was seeing from him. I actually traded him away maybe 10 games ago and was feeling kind of bad about it. But I'm not feeling bad about it anymore. I did not see this coming, though. I'm not that brilliant. There's been like, obviously, you know how I feel about healthy scratches, especially players with talent. I feel like there's another route to this. And Vrana's scratch has been, of course, surrounded by all the classic coach speak, compete level, sending a message, playing the right way, et cetera, et cetera. Although what I do like about this particular scratching, if you're going to scratch a guy like Pedro Laviolette has with Jacob Vrana, it's a defined timeline. Right? This isn't a day-to-day thing. It's not like with Vigneault and Gostisbehere. He's like decides 2 hours before the game every day. Oh yeah, you're going to be stretched. Oh no, you're going to play. It was very clear Vrana is going to sit for a few games, watch a few games in the press box, and then come on back and see if you've learned anything. What I, of course, don't like about him being scratched, even if it is for this defined timeline, is that this was supposed to be this season a continuation of last year's breakthrough for Vrana, as you kind of hinted at, Elon. Like he kind of broke out last year, 62-point pace, largely thanks to a bump in power play production. This year, we wanted to see him build on that. But this year, Vrana has stalled. He's seeing a drop in his ice time at 5-on-5. And even though he's gotten this great power play deployment, he only has 3 power play points in 35 games. He did more with less last year. Speaking of doing less, at 5-on-5, Vrana is shooting and scoring less than last season. So his 5-on-5 play hasn't been as good, but it's been covered up by some friendlier secondary assist rates and a high on-ice shooting percentage. That's all to say Vrana has played worse at 5-on-5 than the score sheet is giving him credit for, which is a red flag for me with Vrana. On the other hand, on the power play, nothing's gone right for Vrana. Low points participation, hasn't scored on 13 shots when he should probably have at least 1 or 2 goals. On the whole, Vrana is overperforming at 5-on-5 and underperforming on the power play, but probably more so the former than the latter. Like they're not going to wash out to him being who he is right now, which is like a 55-point player. They're going to wash out to being a little less. Of course, the X factor in all of this is what does his coach think of him? We'll see if this reset helps Vrana or his coach get to a place where they need to be. I want Vrana to come back and reclaim the top power play deployment, which he lost a few games before he was scratched. Maybe that was the first warning sign that Vrana was in trouble. And so I just, I guess my concern is that he's going to come back, still be in the doghouse, still not sure how to work his way out of it. Meanwhile, Jared McCann is in nobody's doghouse, 11 points in his last 12 games and 33 shots over those 12 games too. Also 4 power play points in his last 5 games. That's really helped him. Played a season high 19 minutes and 17 seconds against Boston. And McCann has now been on the top power play for 3 games ever since Kasperi Kapanen got injured. He stepped into that role and he's been doing pretty well there. So very Donskoy vibes from Jared McCann in that he's doing something we've never really seen him do in terms of production. With deployment, we've never really seen him keep. And a power play audition that seems to be going pretty well, and shot rates that have risen. So all those things put McCann in a similar category to Donskoy, but I'm actually buying that McCann's production is a little more sustainable than Donskoy's has been. McCann's shooting percentage is high, but not as egregiously, and nobody like Kadri is nipping at McCann's heels for the power play spot. It's going to take Kapanen or Malkin to be outjuried for McCann to lose his spot. So I like his security there, and that's why I think, especially if I'm looking at a short-term impact to help get me into the playoffs and seed myself well, I'm looking at McCann. If I'm looking further ahead, if you're crushing your league and you're looking to a matchup 3 weeks from now, maybe at that point, well, I think definitely at that point, I would prefer Vrana, but in the short term, I would swap him out for Jared McCann.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna like have an easier answer of just like dump Vetrano. Like, who has time to wait for scratch players? But I guess you're thinking really long term. If this and if that and if it all goes well. Like another thing I'm seeing is that finally Evgeny Kuznetsov gets back on the top power play, and he had a power play assist today, primary assist on an OV goal, which is how things should be, right? Like, why was Kuznetsov not on the top power play? So I think it'll be tough for Vetrano to get back. Obviously, this is up to Peter Laviolette. I get your reasons. Like, obviously, Vetrano gave us a lot of reasons to be into him last year, and you've been into him for a while before that because he was even having high shot rates back when he used to not get the primo deploymento. But yeah, right now, like if I'm playing fantasy, like you and I maybe play differently, but I'd rather just grab, even if I'm like locked in, I've got the buy set and I'm waiting, like give me the guy who's doing well right now. And also probably if someone like McCann is out there, it might be possible that you could drop Vetrano and no one will add him. So you could just be the first one to grab him back if there are signs of life. First sign being that he's back in the lineup, and then second sign maybe being that he's on the top power play, and the third sign being that he actually gets a point. So yeah, I definitely like appreciate everything you said. But yeah, if it was me, like I don't have patience, so it's just different.
I definitely appreciate everything you said in your detailed 7-minute breakdown of both Vetrano and McCann. But I'll take McCann.
Yeah. Exactly. I do. I thought it was very useful.
No, of course. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
I just don't have patience. I can't help it. Brian, I'm the guy who dropped Erik Karlsson. I dropped like Tristan Jarry recently. Like I just need to move on. I got to just get my next player.
I hear that. And that's, I think, one of your assets as a fantasy manager. You are always ready to move on. And I don't think it comes to bite you as often. I think because you're really good at making those decisions. So I think another manager making those decisions might get bitten more often than you do. It's a really good quality and one I've tried to practice. And I'm trying to practice it, Elon. I took McCann.
I like it. I agree with you. Yeah. And thank you for the compliment. It definitely does come to bite me sometimes in a negative way. I still remember last year regretting dropping Victor Olofsson when he was bumped off the top power play for a bit. Though right now he's a free agent everywhere. Forget about Victor Olofsson. All right, let's get to a couple higher end players. Now, here's one where, Brian, you get to do a victory lap for sure. Another hot versus cold battle. And I want to talk about Logan Couture versus Jordan Eberly. And Couture started the season so hot. He was basically a point per game guy in the middle of March when we talked about him on the podcast. And I was like, Brian, this is a new Logan Couture. And you're like, nah, I think he's going to go back to being the regular old Logan Couture. Well, you know what? I wish you were right. I wish he went back to being the regular old Logan Couture. Instead, he's basically disappeared. These last 13 games have seen him hit regression harder than you predicted. Only 3 points in that span. He did get an assist in Saturday's 3-2 win over LA, but no shots on goal. I don't like that. He's like, getting the same deployment as always. Like he's playing on the top line with Kane and LeBanc and on the top power play, but his shots are way down in this recent stretch, as are his points. So what's going on with this guy? Then on the other hand, we have Jordan Eberly, who's someone who you've always loved. Though I guess more recently, we've all come to realize that Eberly's not going to be the huge offensive superstar we thought he would be when he was traded from Edmonton for Ryan Strome, actually, who at the time seemed like a bad trade. Now Strome, you'd obviously want over Eberly. So that's kind of interesting. Obviously, Edmonton doesn't reap the rewards of that at all because they moved Strome for, who was it again? Some nobody, right? They traded Strome to the Rangers.
Oh, Ryan Spooner.
Oh God, Edmonton, what are you doing with these trades? Okay. Anyways, so Eberly was looking like the Couture of recent times. He was super cold, only 1 goal in 5 games recently, but like I mentioned, I traded Taylor Hall for him. I mainly wanted Fab, right? I traded Taylor Hall for $25 Fab, and then I got Eberly as a throw-in, and Eberly came into my lineup this past Thursday just in time for a 2-goal, 1-assist outburst in the shellacking of the Caps on Thursday. He followed that up with another assist on Saturday. So yeah, hard to expect Eberly to go cold for long when he's playing with Barzal at even strength on the power play. So it was surprising that he did, but I kind of have faith in him. Couture, though, is also in a good spot, and he's supposed to be better. So I'm very interested to know, after you, of course, you brag about how you called that Couture was going to slow down. I'm actually like the last few, I've been pretty confident what your answer was going to be. Here, I'm actually not sure who you're going to take between Couture and Eberly.
Okay. All right. That's great. I love being able to surprise you, but obviously it's not surprising to you that I do want to take this moment. I'm glad you called back to the moment where you thought we were seeing a new Logan Couture. And I think he's on a 75-point pace that he started the year on, 22 points in 24 games, which was great. But I did point out that there was no way that would be the case. So thank you for giving me this one moment here to say, I told you so. I told you so. And now I'll also acknowledge that I would have never predicted Logan Couture getting this cold now. No one would have. This is not how regression works, right? Being hot doesn't mean you need to be cold later. It just means that you're overperforming for now and you don't need to be awful to balance it out the way that Couture has been doing. So my take is actually almost identical on cold Couture as it was to hot Couture, which is that Logan Couture is a very predictable 65-point player, plus or minus 5 points, though I do see something that concerns me enough to think that rest of the season, we're going to see Couture closer to 60 points than 70 points. And that's something you already mentioned, Elon. It's in Couture's shots on goal. In his great run to start the season, he was averaging 2.5 shots per game. Now, when he has just 3 points in his last 13, he's seeing fewer than 2 shots per game, just 24 shots in 13 games. And here's the really curious part, Elon. He's seeing 2 minutes less per night in ice time. We did see a tweet from Sheng Peng at San Jose Hockey Now about how there are so many Sharks playing through injury right now. And I'm willing to bet, just based on these decreased shot rates and this like 2-minute drop in usage is pretty substantial, especially on a team that doesn't have a lot of other options at their disposal. I'm willing to bet that Couture is definitely one of the more injury affected players right now. And that concerns me for being able to rely on him for that usually reliable 65 points. And that puts me for him, and for me, that puts him closer to 60 points, honestly, maybe even 55. I'm worried about you, Logan. Let us know if you're okay. Maybe take a couple good days off at some point, because San Jose does have a really busy schedule. Meanwhile, Jordan Eberly is a different kind of reliably 55 to 60 point player, the same way Couture is reliably 65 points. But I think Eberly is actually closer to 60 points this year, so on the high end of that reliable range. Even though Eberly's pace is currently just for 54 points on the season, that's honestly, I think it's because he's only managed 4 power play points in 38 games. But Eberly is still on the top unit. He's still shooting, but only scoring on 6% of his power play shots versus his usual 15%. His whole unit is actually struggling somewhat. The Isles with Eberly on the ice are down below 10% shooting on the power play, which is not good. And I assume will just be better the rest of the season, because that's the way it should be. Like I was saying about Vegas earlier in the season. So if you're asking me about Eberly versus Couture, I think I'm going to take the steadiness of Eberly versus the sudden unsteadiness of Logan Couture.
Damn. Eberly, who I got as a throw-in, versus Couture, who I've been relying on to be one of my stars. So that's I'm reeling a little bit. But
I honestly, like you could go either way. I could be wrong about Couture being injured. It just seems like all the signs are there, and there's not a lot of room for him to rest and recover between games. Like there's not a super light week for San Jose coming up.
Okay, so yeah, maybe a hot take is Couture generally isn't that slow, but this is what we've seen lately, and you're saying it'll continue. I thought you'd just go back to saying, you're regular. Yeah, he's
I'm not gonna say he's going to be this bad. But normally I'd say he's 65 points, and I think he's probably 55, 60 points, which is the same we can expect from Eberly. So I guess you could bank on Couture doing, Couture's floor being close to what Eberly's capable of, and then being able to overcome it if he's not actually injured or whatever. Whatever's happening now doesn't keep happening. His ceiling is higher than Eberly's, but I almost feel like this is a lighter version of Strome versus Tavares.
Yeah, damn. Yeah. So, okay. I guess we'll see. I hope you're wrong. I mean, I have both in my couple teams, so I guess I'll be happy if Eberly, but I still want Couture to get back to what he was doing before. Yeah, this injury thing is obviously concerning. And to be fair, you don't know anything. You're just saying that Sheng Peng's had some Sharks are injured. Couture might be just fine, and he might just be not shooting for whatever reason.
I'm just putting 2 and 2 and 2 together, and those are the shot rates, the tweet from Sheng, and the 2-minute drop in ice time.
Fair. All right. So next, let's do now a deep league question, because we've done a lot of players that people are like, okay, I don't have Couture or Eberly available in my league. We have like 20 teams and 15 players per team. So here's one for you. Sticking on the Sharks, how about we look at Rudolph Balcers and compare him to a guy on the Red Wings, Adam Erne. So you might be thinking, why are we talking about these people? Well, I'll give you a reason. Adam Erne had a power play assist today in the shocking win over Tampa. That gives him a 3-game point streak, and he's been playing on the top power play on Detroit with Larkin, Zadina, Rasmussen, and Hronek. He's playing on an even strength line with Hellman Nielsen, which doesn't sound great, but he's getting points. He's on the top power play. He's someone whose name I keep seeing on the score sheet, so I figured I might as well bring him up. Then Balcers on San Jose, he's also on a hot streak. He's got 4 points in his last 3 games. He's playing on the second line on the Sharks with Hertl and Meyer. And obviously this is during the stretch, like we've discussed already, that the Sharks are on a hot streak. So I don't see Balcers getting bumped anytime soon. I think Patrick Marleau was there for a bit. Obviously that wasn't going to last. So I don't know. I probably are going to not be overly excited about either of these guys, but curious to know if you have a strong hunch about which way you would lean here.
I think I would lean ever so slightly to Balcers. Both guys kind of make me shrug, but I see Rudolph's Balcers as maybe a Kevin Labanc light type player. He's like Kevin Labanc, except he shoots about half a shot per game less and is on a pace that's only 5 points lower than what Kevin Labanc is pacing for. Balcer's been like steady-ish as a depth scorer with 11 points in his last 17 games, and his time on ice has been steadily creeping up. And at 5-on-5, even though he doesn't get any power play time, at 5-on-5, Balcers is playing with Timo Meier and Tomas Hertl. So that's pretty nice company to be keeping. There's really nowhere that Adam Erne can actually get similar deployment. He's been on the top power play for about 4 or 5 games now, even though he only cashed in there for the first time today. So I'm not like overly excited about that. And his time on ice, like Balcers has also creeped up from 4th line to middle 6 minutes. But I just don't love the regular opportunities that are even available to him in Detroit as much as I'm interested by Balcers playing with Meier and Hertl. So really, I'd rather not have to rely on any of these guys in most formats. But if you're in a deep enough league that you're deciding between these two, I will go with Rudolph's Balcers.
Well, how about that? Some people are in these leagues. And so you're coming to Keeping Karlsson. We're trying to run the gamut here from medium guys like your Eberlys to your high-end guys like Tavares. And now we're even talking about Rudolph's Balcers. Who's Brian's pick?
You didn't tell me who your pick was of these two.
Yeah, I think I like Balcers also. But also, like, it's so weird that Detroit doesn't have Anthony Mantha on the top power play. Like, I at this point, like, and Mantha's actually doing well lately. He's been getting points. So
that's like, so I thought that going into our recording today, I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen Mantha's number come up on the box score a little bit more lately. And he did have 2 points against Tampa today, which really helped solidify it. But I looked before that game started and I saw he only had 3 points in his last 9 or 8 games before today. But throw that multi-point effort in there. Good for him. Only 1 shot. I don't know. I guess, look, it can only go up from here for Mantha, right? He's on a 42-point pace. That's lower than Rudolph's Balcers point pace this season.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying that Mantha is about to tear it up because of this good game today versus. By the way, how did Detroit beat Tampa with Thomas Greiss in net?
It's not even the first time they've done it.
It's honestly like this just goes to show that we shouldn't be spending so much time talking about goalies, because I would have not in a million years predicted that Greiss was someone worth streaming in for a game against Tampa, and here we are.
Maybe it was partially because Tampa played Christopher Gibson instead of Curtis McElhinney, their third stringer. So that doesn't explain, like, that would probably up the pressure on Tomas Greiss. So yeah, very interesting.
I mean, cool. I guess he's in goalies. Yeah, these are like NHL goalies, right? So even like if you're doing badly, like you're still obviously like one of the best in the world at doing this thing of being a goalie. So obviously if you're in the NHL, you're capable of having a good game, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure we could think of other examples. I used to think Michael Hutchinson is someone who can't like ever have a good game, and he's had a couple good ones this season. So who knows? Thomas Greiss, anyone can do it. If they're in the NHL, I'm saying. Okay. Let's go now to a couple high-end guys. So I want to talk about a player who has recently returned from an injury, and that's Patrick Hornqvist, who came right back to the Florida lineup on Saturday and again today, along with Alex Barkov. So Florida's definitely happy to get those guys back. Unfortunately, they're not going to be getting Aaron Ekblad back this season, but they didn't need Ekblad today to beat Columbus 3-0, a very dominant win, a shutout for Chris Driedger, and Barkov and Hornqvist, you know, just right back on track, right? Barkov had a goal and assist in 5 shots. Hornqvist was with an assist in 5 shots. Barkov, there's no point of doing a would you rather with him. He's one of the top in the league to have on your fantasy team. Hornqvist, I want to compare him to someone who we've talked about a lot this season, and he's really given us a roller coaster ride here, and that's Kevin Fiala over in Minnesota. And Brian, here's another one that you called it, right? Last time he was cold, I brought him up, and you were saying, okay, finally, I'm starting to see reasons why he's going to be hot. And then after that, he went cold again. I was like, I don't know with this Kevin Fiala, but right now, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Okay, so first of all, I like that Minnesota's loading up their power play with 4 forwards and 1 D, Kaprizov, Fiala, Rask, Bonino, and Spurgeon. Man, I've got some sirens going on here. Who am I? Dmitry Filipovich? Do you hear this, Brian? What happened?
Yeah, I hear it. I just have nothing to say. I'm not good at casual conversation, only scripted ones.
Okay. You say something, or do I have to retake it now?
Okay, no.
I shouldn't try.
Hang on. They're finally coming for you for picking Donskoy over Kadri.
Oh, no. Okay. So, yeah, I'm talking about Fiala here. So he's on a good power play because before, remember, Minnesota was sort of like splitting it, kind of like a Vegas situation where finally they're going with their best players on the top power play. Obviously, Parise would be there, Brian, if he wasn't, on the COVID protocol list.
But, of course. Okay. He's coming back soon.
Oh, yeah. So watch out.
And Minnesota has a good schedule.
By the way, another side note is Jared Spurgeon back on the top power play. Dave mentioned that on Stream Scheme today, which, by the way, you need to check out. Next week is a wild week. There's a couple teams with 5 games. There's a couple teams with bad schedules. So listen to Dave and get your predictions for who you should be streaming in to maximize your rosters on a potential critical playoff week. But okay.
We've actually, if you don't mind me going off on a tangent, we've already mentioned 2 or 3, actually 3 players by name who have been mentioned on the Stream Scheme this week. I'll mention Jordan Eberly is Dave's Shallow League Streamer of the Week. But if you want the ludicrous Streamer of the Week, you got to go listen to Stream Scheme in the show notes. Find out which players from a team with 5 games played this week you want.
Yeah, I love Stream Scheme. I'm not just saying that because I know Dave and we're helping, I guess, whatever you call it. What do we do on this show? I basically just take the show and post it. But I'm going to call myself a producer because isn't that what happens in Hollywood? You just call you attach your name.
Executive producer.
Yeah, I'm an executive producer of the Stream Scheme. Anyway, okay, going way back, I'm talking about Kevin Fiala versus Patrick Hornqvist. And with Fiala, yeah. So his even strength deployment lately has been with Rask and Bonino, which isn't ideal, but you can't argue with the recent results. He's hot lately. And another side note is might be time to get back on, since we're just doing all side notes for this section of the podcast. Joel Eriksson Ek and Jordan Greenway are playing with Kaprizov. So those are guys that were hot for a long time and then went cold and they were not playing with Fiala or Kaprizov for a while. But, that line scored a goal on Saturday's game with Eriksson Ek putting the biscuit in the basket. So if Eriksson Ek's been dropped in your league, I like anyone playing with Kaprizov. Kaprizov is one of my new favorites ever since I pulled his Young Guns card on a recent episode of the Near Mint Hockey Card Podcast. Okay, so that's Fiala. Brian, you've always loved Fiala. Even when he's been cold this year, you've said he'll be fine. And right now, this is coming true. Then we have Hornqvist, though. Do you love Fiala enough to even take him over Patrick Hornqvist, who, like I said, he got right back on the score sheet on Saturday. Again today, he's playing with Huberdeau. He's on the top power play. Just everything Hornqvist has done this year has been amazing. I've loved having him. He's been one of the best late draft options. A lot of people didn't take him high and are the people who did take him are definitely enjoying their lives. So Brian, who's your pick? Hornqvist versus Fiala. I feel like this is a heavyweight bout.
You know how steadfastly I have supported Kevin Fiala this season, and I give anyone who still has him on their roster and has been through the low lows a pat on the back, especially because the lowest lows for Fiala came pretty recently, back in the second week of March, just before Fiala turned on this gear that got him to this hot streak. Kevin Fiala posted his 3 lowest ice times of the year, and he had just 15 shots over 10 games. Compare that with having 72 shots over the previous 20 games. That's a massive drop and something that could have been the straw that broke the camel's back for anybody who rostered Kevin Fiala all season, but now his ice time and his shots are gone. What's the point anymore? But it seems that Fiala has corrected that lately with 4 shots in each of his last 3 games. Fiala also has 3 power play points on Minnesota's last 7 power play goals, which have happened on their last 37 opportunities, which has happened since we pointed out that Minnesota had a really, really unlucky power play in our midseason surprises episode. So things seem to be on the up and up for Kevin Fiala and that Minnesota power play. With all that said, I'm going Patrick Hornqvist here. If I had to pick between them, and I would not have anticipated myself saying this at the start of the year, or even a month into the year, but what Hornqvist has been doing this year is just undeniable. He's on a 63-point pace this season, which isn't even anything fancy, and a lot of it is thanks to the best power play production we've seen from him in a few years, and that's a good thing, right? He's back producing on the power play. Remember the years where he did that in Pittsburgh? He's doing it again in Florida, and he's got that value back because of it. The reason that I'm even more behind Hornqvist than the 63-point pace is I think Hornqvist, his play could actually exceed that pace the rest of the season. I could see him being a 70-plus point guy the rest of the way if I'm looking at the bigger Hornqvist picture and being maybe a shooting percentage could be better here, and maybe the variance could be better here too. And then if you're looking at Fiala, the saving grace has been those shots on goal that he's had most of the season. Hornqvist has those already himself. 4 or more shots for Hornqvist in 6 of his last 7 games. So he's got everything that Fiala is supposed to have And this year, even more. So I will take Patrick Hornqvist over Kevin Fiala.
Okay, yeah, easy answer, right? I had to throw a lob there. I definitely agree with you. How can you not love Hornqvist right now? I'm glad that he's back healthy. It was Zadorov that gave him that crazy body check that knocked him out for a week. Zadorov's been injuring lots of people, so please keep Zadorov away from all of my fantasy players on my teams. Okay, so I want to stick in Florida, actually, because Hornqvist, Barkov, Huberdeau, they're awesome. We've talked about Carter Verhaeghe a ton, but there's a couple new guys that are hot lately that I wanted to get your thoughts on. So here's another matchup between two teammates. I want to get your take on Alex Wenberg versus Frank Vetrano. So Wenberg, he's on fire lately. So he's playing with Huberdeau and Hornqvist, two amazing players. And he's been on the top power play lately, which is really great. So it's like Hornqvist, Huberdeau, Barkov, and Wenberg, and then with Keith Yandel. So obviously we were last week trying to just figure out what's the impact, the fantasy impact of Ekblad being out for the season. Looks like Wenberg getting his spot on the top power play is the answer, at least for now. So that's a great reason to like Wenberg. Then we have Frank Vetrano, who has now scored a goal in 3 straight games. And Vetrano does this, right? He's done this earlier on in the season, going on a hot streak. Yeah, he's on the third line. Yeah, he's on the second power play. But when he's hot, he's hot. He had another goal today in the win over Columbus. So what do you think, Brian? Do you go with the better deployment with, just looking at frozen tools? You'd be like, okay, of course I want Wenberg, better line and a better power play. But I'm looking at Vetrano, who's taking a lot of shots, which we like. And he's obviously been a more reliable person overall on the season. So what's your pick?
It's really funny that Wenberg has made himself this fantasy relevant player by scoring goals. Why is this happening? Yes, Wenberg got a hat trick plus a goal in the game before he got a hat trick, but Alex Wenberg is not a scorer. He's not even a shooter. He scored his 4 goals on 5 shots. And then do you know what he did, Elon, in the game after Wenberg scored a hat trick?
I don't know. He went cold.
I need to just verify this because I did it, I think, before the game was over.
I'm gonna guess he did nothing.
Well, yeah, he did nothing, and that's a given. But after scoring 3 goals on 4 shots, you might think, hey, Alex Wenberg is probably going to try and shoot once more in his next game. No, 0 shots on goal. The game after, he scores 3 times. How many hat tricks have ever been followed up with 0 shots on goal the next game? That is classic Alex Wenberg, who we expect to be more of an assist getter anyway. So I'm looking down the assist column being like, oh, what's Wenberg been doing there? Nothing. 3 assists in his last 24 games, 0 assists in his last 11 games, 7 assists in 39 games on the season. His deployment is great, but it's been good before this season, and he hasn't done anything with it. So no thank you on Alex Wenberg, who does not shoot the game after he scores a hat trick. And yes, please, to Frank Vetrano, who is this season's streamer of the year, right? How many different teams in everyone's league has Frank Vetrano found himself on at one point or another, thanks to Florida's off-day schedules that pop up pretty regularly, plus just his general upside for shooting and scoring, plus his often result of not actually scoring. But lately, Vetrano's doing that. 3 goals on 16 shots in his last 3 games. He'd gone cold and had limited ice time, and he's on the third line. But so long as Vetrano's shooting, he's doing what you want Vetrano to do. So I am not swayed at all by Alex Wenberg's hat trick. And as you know why. Also, I should mention someone I'd also prefer to Alex Wenberg is Owen Tippett, who has a goal and 4 assists in his last 8 games and had a 9-shot game a couple weeks back. He's been pretty quiet in the shots on goal column since then, but he is putting up points at a slightly more regular pace than Alex Wenberg has been. So if I were to rank my Florida streamers, Owen Tippett would be ahead of Alex Wenberg. Heck, even Mason Marchment might be ahead of Alex Wenberg.
Man, I mean, yeah, I know that he had a hat trick and that's not going to happen again, but I just I don't even think I mentioned that. I'm mainly just swayed by him being on a line with Hornqvist and Huberdeau and being on the top power play. I feel like that makes me more interested in him than Tippett and Marchment.
He's been here before though. Do you know how many games?
Not on the top power play.
He's been on the top power play for the last 8 games.
What?
He's 1 point.
Oh, right. Well, okay. But then that Barkov and Hornqvist were out. I'm talking about on this version of the top power play. That's kind of interesting to me.
So that might be reason to be a little more interested again. But honestly, I've been through this with Wenberg. I was standing for Wenberg back in Columbus when they wouldn't use him as the top line center, even the second line center the year after. I thought he was giving us signs of a breakout. He's now 26 years old. he's never done a whole lot outside of that third season where he paced for 60 points.
Yeah.
He scored 59 points in 80 games. Very impressive. But I feel like that's as ready as I am to ever endorse Alex Wenberg, is to say, remember what he did 4 years ago and he's done nothing since? Yeah, maybe he'll get lucky.
I mean, yeah. So for me, it's just like, I'm going to ignore, like, yeah, I'm on the same page. Like, I'm not expecting big things from Alex Wenberg. I'm just saying, like, you know, who cares what happened over the last couple of weeks or like most of the year? Like, if he's playing with these two players who we love, and Huberdeau and Hornqvist, and if he's on the top power play, he might luck into some assists. I think it's going to happen.
So Jared McCann or Alex Wenberg?
McCann.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you prefer Wenberg to anyone else we've talked about? Ernie, Balcers?
Yes, I take Wenberg over Ernie and Balcers.
But not Donskoy.
No, not Donskoy. Because Donskoy is also on the top power play.
Yeah. Okay. So of all the guys we've mentioned on the show tonight, Wenberg is one of the worst.
Okay, sure. I know you want to make sure to put that in there. This name the episode title could just be Wenberg is the worst, and then you'll be happy. All right.
I'm just making up for all the times that I had faith in him. He burns me.
You know, Wenberg, you blew it too many times. Stop crying wolf with these hat tricks, okay? Brian's not buying into it anymore.
Hell hath no fury like a Brian scorned.
So let's get back to the high end guys here. I want to run a couple defensemen by you. One of them also, this is going to be another opportunity for you to be like, I told you so, but not about Adam Fox, because he's been great at the start of the year. He's been great in the middle of the year, and he's been especially great lately. Adam Fox has been amazing. He's on a run currently with 18 points in his last 10 games. Yes, you heard that right. I guess we mentioned before about Ryan Strome. I guess it would have been smart of me to just bring up Fox then. Like Panarin is hot. Like, just the Rangers are scoring a lot of goals recently, and Fox has clearly stepped up as not only the top power play defenseman on the Rangers, but maybe one of the top defensemen in the league, at least for fantasy, but also like not, because he's like apparently a really good defenseman just in general. 33 points in 36 games on the season now. That puts him in second in D scoring behind only Victor Hedman, which means Fox is ahead of John Karlsson, Dougie Hamilton, Tyson Barrie, Shea Theodore, Chris Letang. The only other player that probably should be in that conversation is Cale Makar, because he has a higher point pace than both Hedman and Fox, but unfortunately he's missed some time. But yeah, like Fox is right in that conversation. So I think this is going to be an easy one. But the flip side, I want to bring up Jeff Petry, who was among the top of all of the defensemen in the league, you know, a couple months into the season. He was doing amazing, and especially with the peripherals. He was just blowing everyone out of the water, but he's gone cold lately. He's pointless in 4 games, only 2 assists in his last 7 games. Plus, if your league counts plus minus, you definitely didn't enjoy that -5 that he dropped on you in the 6-3 loss to Ottawa on Saturday. So Brian, I think that you're going to say Fox over Petry. So it's more like I just wanted to, you know, shoehorn a Petry conversation in here to see if you think he's going to keep being this slow. But I also would just love to ask you in general for Adam Fox, like, where is he going to rank next year in people's draft list? Do you take him as like the 2nd, 3rd goalie in fantasy?
You said goalie.
Oh, 2nd, 3rd defenseman in fantasy?
You might want to start from, do you take him?
Do you take him as like the 2nd or 3rd defenseman in fantasy?
He's way, way, way up there. I'm trying to find reasons to tell you that Adam Fox's 39 power play point pace is not going to sustain. I don't like, it's not going to sustain. Okay. But he's not going to be that far off. Like, he is looking very clearly like a 30 plus power play point guy, plus some fantastic 5-on-5 production as well. And he's someone, like you said, Elon, who's been consistent almost all year. The start of the year, he had a bit of a slow patch when he first ended up on the top unit, but since then has just been gangbusters, especially getting in on so much of this crazy Rangers production lately, up to that 75 point pace that he's on now. And I have nothing bad to say about Adam Fox. I'm really excited for us to have another really high end fantasy option. So, yeah, I'm still like, as I say this, I'm browsing through his numbers and just flipping like, but is there one cap? No, there's not. He's been really, really outstanding. Again, basically getting a power play point every other night, Meanwhile, Jeff Petry is someone, we've talked about this, Elon, I think. He started the year way too hot. Well, he continued the year way too hot. Petry's like a 45-point guy with nice peripherals. He was never going to be the 30-goal scorer he was briefly on pace to be. Right now, he's still on a 65-point pace, even with this recent cold streak. And that just speaks to how crazy, ridiculously good his initial run was, which was not going to continue, which again, like Couture, doesn't mean that he's got to be really awful to balance things out. It just means that he's going to be a 45-point player the rest of the way. So I wouldn't predict him to stay this cold, but I also don't think he's going to be anywhere near the value he gave you at the start of the season. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say about Adam Fox as another good thing. Here's a fun fact, Elon, that I'm not sure you would have known. The New York Rangers, remember every year, Colorado is the team that draws the most power plays?
Oh, yes, I do recall that.
So this year, second highest number of power play opportunities goes to the New York Rangers, which is one reason why I think Adam Fox has been able to have so much power play success. I haven't looked into who exactly is doing the heavy lifting here and drawing penalties, but Adam Fox is averaging over 4 minutes of power play time per night. And so that's one of the reasons that he's been able to put up as many power play points as he has. Just so many opportunities for the Rangers this year. So good for them and good for Adam Fox for taking advantage.
And the crazy thing is the Rangers should get better, right? Like you'd think like in terms of overall goals, like Capo Caco, like Lafreniere, like these players are all going to get better. Oh man, this Rangers team, I'm excited about them. Now's a good time to be a Rangers fan. They might not make the playoffs this year, but obviously high upside with Adam Fox now, just really breaking out.
Having some severe deja vu with you saying that, like at the start of like last season, at the start of this season, it could actually be true. That might be the last time we say it.
Well, the thing is, even like going into this season, I wasn't saying they have like a top 3 defenseman in the league. Now all of a sudden, like that's changed. Now Adam Fox is like for real one of the best. Like I could see myself drafting him. Like if I'm in a fantasy draft next year, yeah, maybe I'll take Cale Makar. I think I would actually take Fox over like a Hedman for next year. Like, just in terms of the upside, I don't know. Like, I think it's a good, like, we'll have a whole offseason to debate like, rankings for next year, but that'll be a fun discussion for sure to see where Fox ranks.
Just to close the loop on another fun discussion, do you want to guess who's drawn the most penalties for the Rangers this year?
Someone like I wouldn't expect. No, actually, no. Let me say someone I would expect. Panarin, someone really good.
No, he's actually he's drawn 2 penalties all season long.
Chris Kreider.
No, 6 penalties. He ranks tied for 6.
Okay, tell me this. Is it like a good player that like we talk about a lot? Okay, Colin Blackwell.
No, not him either.
All right, give it to me.
Well, no longer New York Rangers. Maybe that's not why you didn't think of him. Brendan Lemieux has drawn 9. Brendan Smith has drawn 9. Julian Gauthier has drawn 8. And Ryan Strome, 8, and Buchnevich, 7 are the 5 highest penalty drawers on New York, one of the top penalty drawing teams in the league.
So there you go. It's an underrated skill. Maybe that should be a fantasy category. Penalties drawn.
I've been advocating for this.
I did not know, or I probably knew and forgot because I forgot.
Penalty plus minus would be incredible. Penalties taken minus penalties drawn.
Oh yeah. Okay. I like it. Okay, yeah, because penalty minutes is like a weird category also beyond just like, is it helping you or hurting you? We've had that discussion a million times, but also it's weird how it's like, a 5-minute penalty or like a 15-minute penalty is like basically you win your week in penalty minutes if it's a categories league. Like I think it should just be like a penalty is a penalty, right? Penalties drawn. How many penalties did you draw? It doesn't matter if it was a 4-minute or a 5-minute or a 15-minute. Anyway, okay, let's do another defensive matchup here, a little lower down the list. I want to talk about a couple of Chicago Blackhawks in Adam Boqvist and Connor Murphy, a classic fantasy decision. Are you going to go for points upside or are you going to go for certain periffs? Because Adam Boqvist, like on the surface, like, so he went hot at the start of March, right? He had this hot run. We talked about on the show. We said you should probably go and grab him. And since then he's done nothing, but everything like that I care about, like he should still be hot, right? I'd like to know why not. He's stayed on the top power play the whole time. His minutes have gone up since then. So it's like everything we were hoping for at the beginning of the year. Boqvist has been getting all the opportunities, but now he only has 1 assist in his last 10 games. Meanwhile, Brian, this is actually fun because you had Adam Boqvist in the cupful. And I remember often you would like, you message me and you're like, who should I drop? Like, I want to add someone. Who do you think I should drop? We'd like ask each other this question all the time. And you had Connor Murphy forever. And I was always, my first instinct was probably Connor Murphy. But then like I would look or like you would tell me like, nah, he's like solid. He's just getting me solid points every game. So eventually he became a free agent in Tier 1 Sweden. And, even though he had been cold for a while, even with the Periffs, I just remembered the Brian love for Connor Murphy. And that convinced me to add him. And ever since I did, he's been awesome. Like he's just getting you 2 shots, a couple blocks, a couple hits. He even has 4 assists in his last 7 games. So he's blowing Boqvist out of the water, even for offense, which is not what you'd expect. So Brian, I'm very curious to know, Lewis, from the Short Shifts podcast, had Boqvist and a couple dropped him today. Do I need to consider swapping to get that top power play upside, or should I stick with my safe Perifs guy?
Stick with your safe Perifs guy in Connor Murphy. I have boosted him at least since last season as being someone. Last season, he was actually even more effective as a peripheral getter. This season, not quite as much. And I wonder if that's because Chicago has cleaned up their game a little bit defensively. But I will take Connor Murphy's peripherals over Adam Boqvist's points, because Boqvist, for all his power play one opportunity, over the last month in 15 games, he has 6 points. Connor Murphy, over the last month in 15 games, has 4 points, which over a month, over 15 games, those 2 points are not a big difference. Neither one can or should be relied on for their production. So you can at least rely on Connor Murphy for his peripherals. I would say if you see Boqvist starting to go on a run again, then you can go ahead and make that swap, but I wouldn't preempt it until I see it actually happening. I'd be very happy to just sit tight with Connor Murphy's peripherals.
Yeah, like I agree with you. And like that's what my head says. That's what my heart says. Like everything says that. But I guess the question is kind of like I ask myself when I really like try to take a look from above. It's like if I was a robot, it's like, what's the difference between if Boqvist gets a power play point in the next game or doesn't? Like the following game, he still should have the same chance of getting a power play points as he had going into next games. Like what would it be to you? Like
right, just, but at some point it's an indication of how successful he's going to be on the power play.
Right. So you're saying you want to see him get a couple points. I just feel like if people follow that advice, he's going to be in free agency. He's going to get a couple points. People are going to add him and then he'll go cold again because like that's what seems to happen. So it's really hard. I guess what we're saying is like, we don't have much faith in Adam Boqvist, right? Like you're going to have to see a lot of production to change your mind. Otherwise, maybe don't just rush to get him if he gets points in a couple games in a row, because he's had this opportunity this whole time and has done nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Boqvist has had 2 weeks all season of steady power play production, which either tells us he's capable of doing it all season long and he just hasn't for the last 10, 12 games, or it tells us that that's all he's capable of actually accomplishing. And we don't know the answer yet because we haven't seen enough of Adam Boqvist in the NHL or on that top power play yet. But at this point, I'm going to have to say, show me before he's added to my roster. And maybe I'll jump on him if I see like 1 point. Okay, good. Like it depends on your threshold, but I'm not going to go and hold him because he does literally nothing else.
Okay, so Brian, before I get to our last matchup of the episode, do you want to change your vote on Petrangelo versus Shikrin? Because Jacob Shikrin just scored a goal. Woo!
No.
Okay, still Petrangelo.
Did you even say your vote for that one?
I agreed with you on Petrangelo.
Okay.
Now I changed my mind. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm very happy that Shikrin's, hopefully going to start getting something going. All right, I actually had this earlier planned, but I moved it because I wanted to wait till the end of the Carolina Hurricanes game to discuss this last one. There's 2 minutes left. I almost made it. So maybe by the time we're done this discussion, the game will be over. But I want to do a couple goalies here, and we have to talk about Petr Mrazek, who returned finally. Like, how many times have we seen tweets saying Petr Mrazek is close to returning from that thumb injury? It's just been like weeks and weeks of like, he's coming any day now. But today, Sunday, April 4th, Petr Mrazek returned versus Dallas. And with 2 minutes left in the game, Carolina is currently up 1-0. He's got a shutout running. So I guess I'm jinxing it. He's got 25 saves. And that's obviously the best return you could have hoped for. So hopefully if you had him stashed, you got him in for today's game. And I'm curious to know, Brian, like how high should we be on him? I put him here versus Jonathan Bernier as the matchup as like 2 injured guys. I wasn't realizing when I prepped yesterday that Mrazek would actually return. So I was planning on this being a discussion of 2 guys who are probably going to be back soon, because the news is Jonathan Bernier is practicing and he's going to potentially be back soon. So maybe next week we'll be talking about Jonathan Bernier being back in the lineup. I know like you would say for sure Mrazek has a better shot at getting wins because Carolina is a much better team than Detroit. Though the argument that we've always had against these Carolina goalies is they don't let in a lot of shots, which makes it really hard for them to have a really good save percentage unless, they get a shutout. Obviously, like Alex Nedeljkovic has, had a couple sub 900 save percentage games lately, even though he only let in 3 and 2 goals versus Chicago and Dallas. Same for Reimer on Thursday versus Chicago. He stopped only 22 of 25 in the 4-3 win. So you basically have to let in 2 goals or less to have a good game on Carolina and not blow your save percentage. And I'd assume that'll be the same for Mrazek. Like he's a victim of the team being so good. There's so few shots against that you have to save almost all of them to have a good save percentage. So with that in consideration, is it still a runaway of Mrazek over Bernier? I guess the other question is like, what's Carolina going to do? Because they have 3 goalies now, unless they trade someone at the deadline. How many starts is Mrazek even going to get? You'd think Bernier is going to get the lion's share of starts once he's back. So maybe it's still kind of interesting, though I'd imagine you're going to say Mrazek.
That's me not knowing what I'm gonna say before you ask me the question, even though you told me you were gonna ask me this. I think I would prefer. So a lot hangs in the air uh, because I don't know that Jonathan Bernier is going to play again for Detroit. Like, this return from injury seems to be coming along really slowly, and I honestly I half wonder if the Red Wings just aren't playing him. Well, one, because they're tanking, and two, because he's going to get traded, and they don't want to risk him being re-injured. I would think if I'm trading for him, I'd love to see him in one healthy game, or maybe there's some other way for the Red Wings to offer proof that Jonathan Bernier is healed and ready to go before they trade him. But that's my concern with Jonathan Bernier, is just you might still wait another week or more before he's able to start another game. So that would be reason to look at Petr Mrazek, who does have that Carolina curse of, if you're a good goalie, you still aren't guaranteed good numbers. Actually, Mason on our Discord server earlier this week coined a performance of 20 saves with 3 goals against and a win, the James Reimer, which is exactly what it is. That's the Carolina goalie. Like you said, if you're not going to get a whole lot of shots against, you might give up 2 or 3 goals. Your save percentage might still not be good, and hopefully you get the win. And also, Carolina has this complicated goalie situation right now where Nedeljkovic had been good. Now he's been bad his last 2 games. So that bad in the Carolina way. The last couple games, that's opened the door nice and wide for Mrazek to just walk in and take the job. But they've got Mrazek, Reimer, and Nedeljkovic. And this is a team that's never committed to 1 goalie, that is rarely even committed to 2 goalies. So we'll see what that means for starts down the stretch. And that makes me nervous about having Mrazek on my roster, because I'm just burning a spot for a guy who's going to play once every other game, probably, I think. I don't even know. Versus Bernier, who in Detroit should play every game if he stays in Detroit. So honestly, this one for me, you tell me if this is too much of a cop-out. I guess it is, because you want an answer. I was going to say it's too close to call. There's too many unknowns here. Is Bernier going to play again in Detroit? What's Carolina going to do with their 3 goalies? Both of those answers are going to influence my choice. If I have to choose today for the rest of the season based off the information I have now, I think I'll go Mrazek, but it's really close. Like, I could go Bernier. Ask me an hour later, I'll probably say Bernier.
You love Bernier too much, I think. I think it's
I went from hating Jonathan Bernier to loving him too much.
Yeah, he's still in Detroit, right? And yeah, you're saying he might get traded, but if he gets traded, he's going to be a backup. So I feel like either you have the goalie on Detroit, or you have a backup. And I know he's been good this season. He was decent last year, but I think Mrazek is pretty exciting right now. And he's a guy actually who I've used to really have no faith in the past. He had a really good start to this year. And now the shutout is confirmed. He's shut out Dallas in his return, which is very exciting. Who is this? Jack Campbell come back from an injury. You get a shutout in your first game. Amazing. And who would have thought in this episode, the 2 goalies we'd be boosting are Campbell and Mrazek going into the season.
Elon, I'll just point out it was against Dallas.
Oh, yeah, of course. So that was basically a guaranteed shutout, but he did make 28 saves. So Dallas did try to get something by him.
And 5 of them were on Jason Robertson, which we'll give him full credit for.
Jason Robertson's been so good.
So good.
Once he doesn't play against Petr Mrazek, he's going to start piling up those points again. Don't you worry. So, okay. That's it, Brian, for the show. Okay. Just to make it more complicated for you, Martin Jones versus Petr Mrazek. Now you can just really cry. Martin Jones. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll take the chance, assuming that I'm probably going to end up dropping one of these guys anyway. I'll take the chance.
Yeah, I guess this one really comes down to your league settings, right? For wins, I just feel like Carolina is such a good team. Like, you've got a really good shot at a win every time Mrazek plays, though. Like you said, San Jose's been looking good. That's why I said to maybe take a shot on that 66-1 odds on the cup. All right.
Do you obviously you remember that Petr Mrazek, you asked me him versus Jonathan Bernier, started his career with Detroit, right? I followed him closely. I was actually really high on him at the start of his career because I saw him with the Ottawa 67s. Do you know the 3rd NHL team offhand? I did not. I can't even visualize this, but he's played for 3 NHL teams. Petr Mrazek.
He went somewhere in between. Oh man. It's I also have this vague memory. It was like Montreal. Could that be it?
It was Montreal.
Okay, who was it?
It was Philadelphia.
Oh, yes. That year that Philly played like 8 goalies. Like they broke the record for the most goalies that played games for them.
Was it that year? Yeah.
But he was really
terrible
bad, right?
there. Yeah. He was really bad. Good memory. But you, like, I give you full credit for getting that.
I'll take half credit.
I have no recollection of this.
Okay, well, I don't get full credit. I didn't guess it until you told me. I just remember that they had that crazy year that every goalie got injured. And that's the year that Carter Hart finally got in when he wasn't supposed to because everyone else was injured. And then he did so well. And here we are a couple seasons later, and Carter Hart is struggling. And we you say he's a push with Martin Jones, and I disagreed with you. So here we are. We'll be discussing Carter Hart and Martin Jones and all these goalies for years to come because we're not going anywhere on the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast. So thanks everyone who's been on this ride with us all this way and all the way through this season. We want to wish you all the best of luck as you go into the final weeks of your regular seasons and into your fantasy playoffs. If you want any advice, we're here to help. Okay. So we've got our Twitter at Keeping Karlsson. We'll try our best to help you. If you want some like in-depth advice, this is like the start of April right now. It's the perfect time to sign up as a patron of Keeping Karlsson. I'm not saying this for me, like just a salesman. I'm saying this because like you could literally become a patron for free because you only get charged by Patreon at the end of the month. So if you want to pull a fast one, we will not begrudge you. Come in, sign up to be a patron. Join our patron-only Discord server. Ask all of your advice questions to Brian and myself and all of the smart patrons out there, Ben and Lewis. And then, if you don't like it, leave by the end of April and you won't have paid a penny. Plus, you'll get a patron cast that will be dropping in a couple weeks. So it's a good time. So check it out, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. But with that, Brian, I think I'm ready to wrap this baby up. So let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons. One more reason to become one right now. It's a little quieter at the moment on our Discord server than it was at the start of the season, so you get more attention. Is that a reason? I think that's a good reason.
I think so.
Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and NBC Sports Edge. Oh, and Yahoo.
And Yahoo, yes, of course. Thank you very much, Brian, for a really fun Would You Rather episode. Let us know, by the way, on Twitter if you liked this concept. We've been trying lots of different concepts. We haven't heard back from anyone. So I'm going to assume everyone likes all of these themed episodes we've been doing until I hear otherwise. Thanks everyone for listening. Great job, Brian. Looking forward to doing this all with you next week.
Until then, no matter who you are, that's okay, because fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Boom. Good job. Lewis is saying in the chat he's locked up the tier 1 playoffs, which means me too.
That must feel good.
Brian, if you end up getting past Matt, is Matt still here? Yeah, he's been here somewhat recently. But yeah, so I want you to join us. This is going to be insane. This could be me, you, Ben, and Lou. Are we finally going to do it, Brian? If you earn your way into tier 1, I'm not leaving. By the way,
yeah.
So you know.
If I earn my way there, neither of us are leaving. We're ready for this. The only problem is that I'm not getting there.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that's sad. I mean, you just have to win one matchup at this point. Oh, no, you have to win the quarters.
No, I need to win two. I need to win. I'm not going to make it.
Because of the Canucks.
Yeah. Well, there's the Canucks, there's Malkin, there's Forsberg, there's Palmieri.
There you go. It's the most important thing in fantasy is to have excuses for why you lost. That's always been my advice. Like, you tell me any season where I lost and I'll tell you why. Last year, Tarasenko, that killed me.
I mean,
and Zibanejad.
I will and did I mention McDavid's schedule too? McDavid's schedule, I will totally cop. So I'm not sure I had the strongest team, but I think I definitely had a chance to win any given week against the strongest teams in the division. Just before Malkin got injured and Forsberg, they both got injured in a very short span. I had one of the highest scores in the division for 3 or 4 straight weeks. And now the wheels have fallen off.
Sorry, Brian. Well, it's not over yet.
I'm still hopeful.
Also, this might be a smart strategy. Going into this week in our Fantasy Hockey Trades Invitational, I was pretty confident that we were going to lose to Webstar. He had more games played scheduled for the week. He's been the team that's always on our heels every week for the top, points. And I wrote in the league chat or I tweeted it. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, I think I tweeted it, being I think that they were going to lose our perfect record this week. And our team exploded. They were amazing. And we won. So maybe this will be the same for you now, where afterwards people are going to play this back. Matt is going to be against you in a playoff matchup, and he's going to feel confident.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. Anyways. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying, like, I have faith. Also, you're a smart manager, right? So as long as you don't like get burned during the week by injuries, and like you come into the week with a full roster, I think you'll be able to like, you know, make the right maneuvers to, you know, make the most of your 4 ads. So we'll have to wait and see.
I can only hope.
You could only hope. In the meantime, Brian, you could live vicariously through myself because I've also clinched the playoffs. And I want to make a shout out right now if you're listening. Well, I guess this is only for if you've watched the live video show because this isn't going to go into the audio version. But Tom Crowhurst, you are like, I'm cheering for you next week because if you can beat Marcus and I win my matchup, then I could get a bye, which I would love very much. So Tom, you know, and Brian, Tom's the one I traded Tavares to and the one I traded Taylor Hall to. So I'm really hoping that I regret these trades because they do so well, because that'll land me the bye. So now it's like win-win for me. If they do well, it's fine. If they do badly, it's fine. You're not listening to me anymore.
That's great. No, really.
What did I just say?
If they win, it's fine. If they do badly, it's fine.
Who?
Tom and I forget who else.
No, so I was saying that because I traded Tom Tavares and Taylor Hall recently.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like saying that like
you don't need to hold.
I'm saying like, yeah, even if they do well, it helps me. Anyway, whatever. I can't talk to you. Maybe one day when I'm not doing a podcast with you, I'll be able to have a conversation.
Even when you're doing a podcast with me, it's hard to have a conversation.
You're not even writing things in the chat. So I don't even know where are you writing these messages.
Well, I'm not writing any messages.
You are like, you're distracted. I see you typing things, but then I like look in the chat here and and there's no messages from Brian.
Oh,
are you writing chats with our Ben and Lewis chat? No. Is it your family? Do you have a family thing going on? Do I need to let you go?
Here.
What were you doing? I'm just interested. You don't have to share. We could end the show. I'm just kind of curious.
You'll see it in one of our chats.
Share it with the class. Or what's so interesting that you can't share with everyone?
I just shared it. It's
okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. This was so fun. Okay, so Brian, are you going to root for Lewis? Like he's asking for. Do we want to root for Lewis?
Why wouldn't we root for Lewis?
He's already in the playoffs.
Lewis is so likable.
This is like on Survivor. Like, fine, we've all made it to the final 6 or whatever, but now I'm not cheering for you. Now I'm cheering for me. And Brian, I'd hope you're the same.
I'm cheering for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
Does that mean I can't cheer for Lewis? Is this what you've been telling me?
Well, yeah. I mean, Lewis has clinched the playoffs. So good for Lewis. You're in tier 1. You've done as good as I want you to do. Not that, like, you know, I'm not like, you know, I'm an unbiased commish, like, and I tier 1, blah, blah, blah. But whatever. Like, obviously, I'm happy for Lewis that he's like, you know, landed himself a spot in tier 1. But at this point, I'm not rooting for you. I want you to lose because I want to win. There's only could be one winner. Is that rude? What am I supposed to say?
For
I want Ben to lose also.
Everyone else has to lose.
Yeah. All right. Well, Brian.
Any questions in the chat?
Oh, you want? Okay. Well, do you have any questions, Brian?
What was the great move that Matt said you did?
Oh, the thing that you weren't listening to about how I traded Tavares. At the time, I didn't realize that I was going to need Tom to win that week.
Yeah.
It just kind of like works out that way where it's just, you know, because obviously maybe I'd be a little, but to be honest, I'm not like that. I don't know. Some people are. If I drop someone, but if I trade someone and they do well after, like if my team's doing fine, I'm not going to like worry about it too much. Like I probably did, by the way, like I got Timo Meier and Erik Karlsson for Tavares. Brian, at this point, you'd for sure still take Tavares over Meier, I assume, right?
What? No, I'm kidding. I was listening. Yeah, I would take Tavares over Timo Meier.
Meier had that big 9-shot game recently. It was very nice. But yeah, obviously, like I'd take Tavares back if I could.
Those are Owen Tippett numbers.
All right. Are you working tomorrow or do you have the day off?
Neither. I'm in isolation because my kid has a runny nose.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So when you say neither, you mean like you're going to be busy, like working as a dad, I guess?
Why? What would you like me to do tomorrow?
Well, no, I don't know. I was curious if like I would ask, like, what are you going to be up to? If you have free time, if we can hang out, have a chat. I'm off tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll be
on a bike ride.
Oh, that sounds really nice. Yeah, I will be parenting tomorrow.
Is Josie like parenting with you, or she must also be in isolation, right?
Yeah.
That'll be nice. You know, it's like unfortunate that your kid has a runny nose, but it's nice to spend some time together without having work.
Yeah, it'll be like July and August 2020.
Oh, right. True. Okay, bye everybody. This was fun. Bye, Brian. We'll get this show.
I'd love to chat. I just
this
It's great. Sure. I love chatting. Is this good content?
No, it's terrible. This is not even good content for like our friendship. This is not even like an interesting conversation.
What's the point? Why are we even having this?
This is like a conversation I have with my parents where I'm just like calling to be nice, but I'm not actually having a good time.
And yet we're having it live on YouTube where we don't want to be in it and no one else wants to hear it.
You know, to be fair, I haven't called my mom in a couple of weeks. So if you'd like, I could bring her into the Zoom and I could do my call with my mom, like for everyone. Should I do that?
I would. I would stick around for that. You would have my full and undivided attention.
Maybe next week. All right.
What do you think? Could there be a small talk competition? Like the small talk Olympics? Like whoever can say the most in the most like congenial and friendly way with it actually ever saying anything.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's happening all the time in the dating world, right? Like it's not a competition, but it's like I feel like all these people going on dates from like I remember that used to be my main sort of thing. Like if I could go on a date and like we just like sustain a conversation the whole time, I'm like, that's a good date. Right. It's a low bar. It was hard to do. I hated it when like I felt like it was on me because there's a lot of pressure to think of the next thing to say.
Yeah, but that's what works.
Yeah, but then my wife currently, I still remember from our first date, which is
completely videotaped.
Yeah, that's the conversation for another time.
As everyone's first date is.
But like I remember like that was one of the things I really liked about her was just that I felt like she was like carrying the load and coming up with conversation topics. Like if there was a lull, it was like not only me trying to scramble to come up with the next like thing to say.
Yeah. Okay. We should broadcast. We should air that on our YouTube channel someday.
Or we could just post it for it could be a perk for the patrons.
Maybe we could do like a live watch party.
Have we ever said this to the patrons? Put this for the patron cast. Write this as a patron cast question to tell this story. I don't want to give it up at the end of episode 322, 10 minutes after the content is done.
Tell the story of your first.
All right. Bye, everybody. See ya.
I think I spent more time with Dina I think I spent more time with Dina on your first date with her than you did.
No, that's not true. Okay, well, we'll discuss this on the Patreon cast.
Yeah.
All right, I'm pressing the button. I'm pressing it. That's funny. People Lewis is like, no, you hang up. Okay, bye.